to be there. So, yeah.
Oh,
so I
excellent.
think if people can't attend, please do let us know, and we can sort of make sure that we keep you up to speed so that you have done the full course. But I think the strong intention is stick to these dates. It's just so much better to do it when everyone's here together. And I think that's something we really emphasized yesterday is I think it came through so strongly in the messages from leadership and the messages from, Prof. Ali Padachi and so on, is, the world is changing. It's changing really quickly. And if we want to defend the public utility as a critical cornerstone of service delivery in the country, and I don't mean defend it in a negative way, I mean in a positive way. It means we have to capacitate ourselves. We have to be able to engage with these new private sector programs. We have to be able to know what we're doing. We have to get on board. So it's really a very important self-capacitation that we need to do as a sector.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Can I just add to what Megan said? Sorry, Snow. The other thing we've also picked up and is that another reason for capacitation is so that you also don't get bullied into doing things that you don't want to do, because the private sector obviously has their mandate, and the municipality has their mandate, and the more you know, the more you can be firm in terms of what your policies are and the rules. So I think that's also just to add sort of the other side of the coin, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that while there's new initiatives, it's got to be rule bound. It's got to be regulated. I see Jabulile.
Timekeeper. Colleagues, as your timekeeper, I'll try and be strict. I appreciate all inputs, but there's quite a lot to get through today. Let's hear you, Jabulile, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm just concerned because some of the things that you post here on the chat, Ekurhuleni, I don't know, it's restricting all of the links. So whenever we try to register or click on the certain document, we can't open it. Is it possible maybe if you can share those documents via an email rather than, maybe do it both. But Ekurhuleni, we can, any link that you paste it here, we can click it. Can you please assist with getting some of the important document over the email? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jabulile, and noted. So Nick, I'm hoping you've got email addresses of all the colleagues. So it would be nice to sort of have a parallel approach of sending the emails or of sending the documents via email. Hopefully. Nick, are you around?
Yes. Those colleagues from Ekurhuleni, could you please just send me an email? I'll put my email address in the chat, and I'll email it. However, it's not going to be our main mode of communication because it's not very practical. We will share the links again on our website at the end of the training. But for now, so you can follow along, I'll email you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I go over to you, Johan, colleagues, before I get to you, Johan, in the next 5 minutes, please, we've pasted a link to a quiz on the chat, right? It's a few questions, should take you 3 minutes. It's just for us to ascertain how useful some of the content was on Monday and whether you managed to grasp some of the concepts. Of course, in the next couple of days, we'll get into a bit of detail, but please indulge me and just complete that quiz for me quickly. Okay, over to you, Johan. So you can do that while Johan asks his question, please.
Yeah, I just want to say the links that's posted is just having a restriction on them for the company. So it's like Sustainable Energy Africa, people can open it, but not outside people. So maybe you can just look at that limitation. Thank you.
All right. So what I'm noticing is the restriction is not necessarily on the quiz itself, but maybe other links, Nick, that you might be posting have restrictions. So let's try at all times to limit the restrictions. Nick, over to you. Colleagues, please continue with the quiz. It's just 3 minutes. Then we'll get into the business of the day. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Sinawa. Just a note on that. It's most likely your municipal IT departments that are stopping the links. The links are available for everyone to access, but not edit, as we mentioned the day before yesterday. So you can download them. But I'm going to try and make a plan B for those of you who have very strict IT departments. I've posted my email address in the chat, or you should have it already. If you just send me an email, and I can email you the documents that you'll need for today.
Thank you, Nick. Nick is my colleague. Nick is a man with a plan. Thank you. Colleagues, once again, we've got a link to a quiz on the chat. Just a couple of questions. All the questions, I must admit, we created them using day one's content. There's not a single question there that emanated from a different source outside of the 9 to 4 day that we had on day one. So please complete the questions before we get into the business of the day. If you just joined us, good morning. I sometimes assume most people know me, but if you don't, Snao Skalelana from C. I'm with my team and my colleagues. I've got Megan, Nick, Shirley. I'm not sure if Josh is around, but of course, the broader faculty that will be giving inputs throughout the 4 days. Also, welcome to our municipal participants. Welcome to our NECOM participants. Welcome to our NECOM participants. Welcome to all colleagues. It's promising to be an interesting day. But before we get into today, let's find out, colleagues, whether we were with each other on Monday. So how will we do that? Let's try and complete the quiz. And the chat has got a couple of questions. Very simple. If you are struggling, also another thing I must mention, if some of the questions are a bit tricky, most of them will be dealt with in today's content, right? So don't stress too much. Welcome to colleagues that just joined us. We are at 96 participants. I'm hoping we hit the 100 mark. But I've got 12 responses, colleagues. Are you winning with the responses? We don't have much time. If you're struggling with the questions, other than the fact that maybe your laptop isn't allowing you to access the link, please let me know. But other than that, if you were here on Monday, the entire day, all the questions should be familiar. "13 responses out of 90-something people. Colleagues, if you just joined us, we were 96, 97. Now, welcome to the latest colleague that just joined us. There's a link on the chat with a short quiz. Please complete it. It's questions from day one. Very simple, should take you 3 minutes. All right. So of course, I'm tracking the responses here. I'm seeing that we are getting distinctions. This is a high-performing class. Of course, if my graphs were towards the far left, surely we would have a problem, wouldn't we? But the distribution of this graph is looking good. So on the left is number of respondents, the y-axis, the x-axis is points scored, right? So as colleagues complete the quiz, I'm able to tell on a high level how useful the first day was, meaning that the colleagues are scoring high points. It's not a test, colleagues, it's just for us in the class to make sure that day one's content was understood, and if there are any gaps, we try and address them ASAP. I see we've got 99 colleagues on the chat. Welcome to the latest colleagues that just joined us. We've got a quick quiz. The link is on the chat. Please complete it. It should be quick. We don't have much time for this session, colleagues. You might be lucky. I might start giving away the answers in no time. In no time. All right, we've got 21. Nick, when do you think I should stop with the quiz? At number what? How many responses? What's your take?
Let's say 100. No, I'm joking. At 25.
At 25. All right. So Nick says we should stop at 25. Aha, 100 participants. Welcome. That was the mark I was waiting for. Welcome. Colleagues, we've got a quick quiz on the chat. If you just joined us, let's complete it quickly so we can get started with today. Today promises to be exciting. There was lots of content that was covered on day one. There were lots of concepts that were introduced, but all of these concepts, at the end of the day, they are mathematical concepts, and today they must prove themselves mathematically. So that is what today we'll be doing. But before we get into that, let's just complete the quiz. All right, 23, time isn't on my side. Aha, response is 24. One last response, then I go to the questions. One last response. Who is it going to be? Let's see. Aha, was it you, Martin? Thank you. 25 responses out of 100. Colleagues, I'm hoping for more. Oh, 26. But anyway, let me get to the questions. So you can continue to complete the quiz, but we just need to keep going a bit. Thank you. So question number 1, if you don't attend all the training days, will you receive a certificate and associated extra CPD points? Of course you won't. There are some of us that would hope that they get the certificate and attend 1 or 2 days. Colleagues, let's try and be here every day. Should willing implementation be fair for all parties? Yes, all of us. Well, the sample group of 27 respondents thinks that all willing implementation should be fair. I remember Shirley's presentation really stressed on that on Monday. Wheeling is the use of the municipal or ESCOM distribution grid to transport electricity from a private generator to a private off-taker. Our sample group of 29 respondents think that is true. Josh, your presentation was perfect. When done correctly, is wheeling revenue neutral for municipalities? Yes, it is. All right. So for you colleagues that are not sure, Josh has a presentation today, and he will prove to you using numbers that indeed that is true. All right. Which of these is not a wheeling benefit for the municipalities? Which of these is not a wheeling benefit, right? Reduction in bulk purchases, right? increased reliance on ESCOM, price certainty for businesses and commercial customers. Of course, colleagues, as municipalities, if we diversify our energy mix and we either go the IPP route or we do own generation, then our reliance on one source of electricity. Hey, colleagues, I'm a bit strict also when it comes to unmuting and muting ourselves. Be careful, keep yourselves muted. If you unmute yourself, you might say stuff that might live forever. Please take care of your microphone. All right, so the correct answer is increased reliance on ESCOM. Actually, you reduce your reliance, right? Which of these is not a general wheeling perception in South Africa? So remember, my questions are from day one. So George presented a slide where he spoke to some of the general wheeling perceptions in South Africa. Of course, there should be more than these, right? But this is focused on that presentation specifically. So I said, which is not a general wheeling perception, right? Revenue neutral wheeling model can help curb grid defection. We saw that in Josh's slide, that headline. No wheeling from units that are indebted to ESCOM. We also saw that headline in Josh's presentation. Electricity trading without safeguards could mean cannibalization. We also saw that in Josh's presentation. What we did not see is that wheeling is the reason why there is no more load shedding. We didn't see that. Of course, colleagues, there are many perceptions that you may be aware of that we didn't speak about in day one, but of course, my questions are really based on day one content. Is there a difference between how SSEG tariffs and wheeling tariffs work? Yes, there is. 87% of the sample group thinks that there is. Excellent. Some say no, there isn't. Some, they are not sure. Shirley, you have an interesting task after this intro session to demystify some of these concerns. Okay. Webb's credit method is an acceptable methodology for setting wheeling tariffs in South Africa. Oh, whoa. 95% of our sample group thinks that's true. There's 2 of us in the room who think it is false. Excellent. Today's session will answer that for you. Just keep these questions in mind. Munichs can implement wheeling tariffs without adhering to NESA wheeling rules. Oh, colleagues, this one should be obvious. Remember, wheeling in South Africa operates within the regulatory framework, which is other wheeling rules. So for any wheeling tariff to be implemented, it must adhere to the rules and ultimately be reviewed and approved by NESA. So it's NESA regulated. So if you think that is true, colleagues, we might have to revisit day one slides for you, but I hope that helps. What is the use of system charge? Fees for utilizing the electricity network to recover operational costs, excluding connection fees. Fees for utilizing the network, including connection fees, all of the above. A good number of the sample group thinks these charges exclude connection charges, and they are correct. And when we get into content of the day, Shirley or our colleagues from Ricardo will tell you the difference between a tariff that is informed by a cost of supply and what we call a connections charge or a surcharge as a result of, for example, if you are connecting a generator, right, to your distribution grid, you might need to do some grid strengthening, small project, which may be costly, but that is a cost for you to connect. And that particular cost cannot go into the cost of supply and ultimately cannot inform the use of system charge. But those details, don't worry, our colleagues later on will discuss. Which of these is not a benefit of wheeling in South Africa? Which one is not? Increased carbon emissions? Colleagues, increase carbon emissions is the correct answer. Wheeling reduces carbon emissions because it uses renewable energy sources, right? The marginal costs of a licensee would avoid in any given period if a distributed electricity energy resource provided electricity instead of the licensee, right? That is the definition of the avoided cost. Also, we'll talk about that. We introduced it on Monday, but we'll talk about it in detail today. There's no such thing as a neglected cost or a least favorite cost, colleagues. Please, there's no such a thing. But you will find that in more detail today. Wheeling generators should be registered with NERSA. Yes, of course. What is tariff unbundling? Tariff unbundling is the process of separating tariffs based on a cost study to ensure fair revenue recovery for services provided. It is not informed by a benchmarking approach, and it is not to enrich the distribution service provider. So our colleagues here at the very bottom, 9 colleagues, please listen carefully to Shirley later on. When phasing in wheeling in a municipality, when phasing it in, right, it is sensible to allow generators connected at which voltage levels to start wheeling, right? We discussed this on Monday in our afternoon workshop, and medium voltage seems, medium voltage is a sensible approach because of the cost implications of implementing wheeling. But of course, remember, the rules themselves allow wheeling across all voltage levels, right? But this is primarily a question coming from our session on Monday. All right. The most important question is the last one. On a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable are you with developing a wheeling policy for a municipality? The main objective of Monday was to come out with the customized wheeling policy, having understood its components, having understood its structure. So a successful Monday is reflected by what we see here. So what I'm seeing is that a lot of colleagues within the sample group are still in between about wheeling policies, right? So we are neither here nor there. And it's something for us to address. But I think because the wheeling policy is a living document that will live throughout the week, some of its contents will continue to speak to. And I'm hoping if I ask this question again by the end of this training period, there'll be more colleagues towards the far right of this graph. Colleagues, we don't have much time. We've started quite late, and thank you so much for responding to those questions. I'll do that every morning, colleagues. Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Sinawa. Just a quick note, I've emailed everyone some of the documents, but Shirley noticed that if you are using Microsoft Edge, you might struggle to open the Google links. However, if you use Google Chrome, you won't have any problems. So for those of you that are using Edge and struggling to open things, see if you can open it with Google Chrome, and you might find that it starts to work again.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. We're a bit behind time, so we need to get started. Nick, are we recording this session?
Yes, it's being recorded.
Thank you so much. Once again, if you just joined us, good morning, colleagues. We've got day 2 of our training. We've just recapped day 1 with a couple of questions. And overall, there's understanding of the concepts that we discussed. But today, really, the duty is for us to mathematically and simply, substantiate some of the concepts that we have spoken about in day 1. So that will start with Shirley just now. She will give a tariffs 101. So we are cognizant that not all of us are tariff experts in this room. So we need to start very slowly with tariffs, and who better than to do that for us than Shirley. And then we're going to have a short break. And then after that, we also mentioned yesterday that tariffs are informed by cost of supply studies, especially use of system charges, right? So then we need to see this in sort of, I'll call it an example, right? So how do you then get to the point where you can have a willing tariff using your cost of supply studies? So we've got our colleagues from Ricardo there who will provide that input. And then after the tariff session, then we've got session 2.2. We've spoken about revenue neutrality yesterday. Josh will then get into that, also using some numbers to show what is meant by revenue neutrality. And then we're going to have a short break again. And then we've got our colleagues from NECOM who will then present an NECOM willing implementation case study. So how does NECOM accommodate willing, right? What are the approaches, right? And then that presentation will sort of cover most of the concepts that we are discussing today and the concepts that we've discussed yesterday. And then we will not have a Kahoot, but at 1, we'll have a lunch break, of course, before we have after we've had our Q&A. And then, just like the previous day, colleagues, we'll have a workshop in the afternoon from 2 to 4. That workshop, again, is to bring to life some of the concepts that will be discussed in the morning. That will be use of system charges, right? What are some examples, right? If we're talking revenue impact, what are the tools that we can use to assess the revenue impact of the tariffs that we designed? So our colleagues have designed a tool, a revenue impact assessment tool, and a billing reconciliation tool, where we will test some of these concepts. All right. So I think I've spent eating too much of your time, Shirley. I think let's get to you. Apologies for that. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Let's get straight into it. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully I don't have the same problem I had yesterday. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, so the purpose of today's my session this morning, as Sanoa nicely explained, is just to give a very high-level overview of tariffs 101. It's not by any means going to teach you how to do tariff design, but it's at least explaining the most important concepts of it. So when a tariff gets designed, the first thing you need to have is having a strategic object direction and strategic and setting the objectives. What do I mean by that? You need to know what you want your tariffs to do for you as a business and for your customers. So do you want to go into time of use tariffs? Do you want to reflect, do you want to make all your large power customers go into time of use? Do you want to have net billing tariffs in place? You know, all the requirements of your business, you need to understand, and you need to have some kind of objective in terms of what your tariffs need to do for you as a business. Then the second part of it is sort of when you go into the cost of supply study. So you've got your objectives, but you've also got your cost of supply study. And what comes out of that is the mathematical formula or the mathematical numbers. So you get exactly what your costs would be. And you would look at things like the size of supply, the customer's usage pattern, the what demand they take from your grid, where the supply is located, and you do the cost of supply study, and out pops, and this is the science part of tariff design, where you get cost reflective numbers. But it doesn't necessarily mean your tariffs are going to be 100% cost reflective. So it's no good giving a customer that uses 100 kilowatt hours a month a time of use tariff with a demand charge and so on. So you would restructure that tariff, and you might then want to include subsidies. Some pay a little bit more, some pay a little bit less, because you have other objectives in terms of your business to protect the poor, or to make sure everybody gives a fair contribution. So that's the science is the cost of supply, and the art part of tariff design is when you structure your tariffs to balance the changing needs of your customer and your business. And that becomes the more, let's call it, tricky part of your exercise. And we all know moving towards, for example, higher fixed charges, customers don't like it, the regulator doesn't like it, so then you need to make changes to your approach. So let's just talk a little bit about what do we mean by tariff structures. So the tariffs, or the charges, or the rates, those terms get used interchangeably, are the amounts raised on an electricity bill for the different costs of service. So, and the tariff structure makes up the sum of all those sort of, or the types of different charges that you put into a tariff. So you could have a very simple tariff structure, which is just cents per kilowatt hour, and you could have a very complex tariff structure, similar to the NECOM Megaflex or Munich Flex tariff structure. So in 2022, a draft electricity pricing policy came out, and this expanded. Sorry, just excuse me. I've got a frog in my throat here. This expanded what charges needed to actually be raised. And we know that this pricing policy is in the process of being updated. The 2022 version went out for public consultation, and we're still waiting for the DMRE. But it basically says that the charges reflect the unbundled cost, which should be structured as far as possible to include energy costs in cents per kilowatt hour and generation capacity charge reflecting the purchase cost structure. So if you are buying from NECOM, or NECOM buying from the NTCSA, they would be buying tariffs on a particular structure, cents per kilowatt hour in time of use, and a generation capacity charge. So ideally, you should reflect that in your tariffs. And I'm going to go a little bit into what was approved by the regulator for NECOM. Then transmission network charges reflecting the transmission purchase structure. So if municipalities are Munich Flex, they would be paying a transmission network charge. Also, a distribution network charge based on the maximum demand per billing period, covering distribution network charges in Rand per kVA, or Rand per kilowatts, or Rand per amp. So for a municipality, they would also, if they are connected to the NECOM distribution network, be paying distribution network charges, and they would be having to raise their own distribution network charges for the use of their grid. Then customer service charges, or retail charges, as they're sometimes called, and that could be Rand per customer or Rand per point of delivery. We do know, obviously, for very small customers, you're not going to have all of those reflected as different charges. Then you would have administrative charges based on Rand per pod, or Rand per pod, or point of delivery, or on a monthly fixed value. And then you could have charges for poor power factor. You could have a time of use energy net billing rates for prosumers, charges for the cost of losses. And as I've said, for customer ease of understanding and also the ability to respond, a customer using 100 kilowatt hours a month is not going to respond to a time of use signal. Some categories of customer categories, you're not going to reflect everything. So the the bigger the customer, the more cost reflective the structure needs to be. So these charges could be bundled or unbundled, but still need to recover the full costs, except where there are approved cross subsidies. So why is it actually important to have correctly structured tariffs? Good tariff design gives you the right economic signals for the way you supply electricity and the way your grid is used. But you still need to consider affordability and whether the customer can respond to the signals provided, always. The energy transition is also changing the way customers use your grid, and it's creating new cost drivers. Generators connected to your grid are now changing the way that your grid is used. So you need to look at the way you structure your tariffs to take that into account. Tariff design and tariff structures focus on better allocating costs and unbundling these costs so that customers understand how they contribute to the way that the grid is being used. And we've seen the outpouring of people saying, yes, solar is being targeted and so on and so on. But we've got to recognize the way the grid is used, the profile of those customers is changing. You need to create right cost signals for the way that the grid is being used and the way electricity is being purchased. In the past, when there wasn't all this embedded generation sitting on your grid, it was possible to just have a tariff that had a demand and a kilowatt hour signal. But this, and for larger customers, you would include this demand charge signal, but that's no longer true. The grid now gets used in bidirectional ways. And also, the time electricity is used is becoming more and more important because people are changing their load profile. So it's no longer appropriate to recover all the costs just through cents per kilowatt hour charges. So tariff charges have to provide much better signals for when electricity is used, for the capacity that is provided on the grid. So if you don't consume today because you're on holiday or you've got solar, it still means the grid is there to provide this backup. You don't remove that transformer because the customer's not there for the day, or has a holiday home and is not using their holiday home for 6 months of the year. So these capacity costs need to be recovered in a more fixed way. And again, there's the charges. How much should it be fixed? Because if you make the fixed charges too high, you reduce your demand side management signals. Customers could go off grid because it's cheaper for them to actually provide their own capacity through batteries. So you want to create tariff structures and signals that minimize your own costs, but enable the customers as well to save if they actually respond to the signals. So we're going to just touch on what NECOM proposed, because this also has an impact for municipalities in the way that their tariff structures are going to have to be set going into the future. So NECOM did a cost of supply study, but they used the 24-25 revenue decision. So I know with the municipalities, their cost of supply studies and tariff process sort of is all in one type process. But with NECOM, you get an MYPD decision, and once you have a revenue decision, the tariffs are then based on that revenue decision. And coming out of this, you got cost-reflective unit rates. These are not yet tariff charges, because you now start to design your tariffs. And what happened is, because NECOM applied average increases to all the rates over the years, but energy actually went up with a higher rate than, let's say, network costs, the energy charges, including the generation capacity charge, increased and the network charges reduced. So these allocated costs that come out of the cost of supply or cost to serve, that's also a term used, are then used in a tariff design model, where the starting point is to reflect the cost as accurately as possible. Then sometimes you have to do some scaling, where within a tariff category, you see one customer, for example, Eskom's home power tariff has 4 tariff categories based on the subcategories based on the notified maximum demand. And you might find, okay, if I use the costs as is, one of the categories pays 50% more and another category pays 30% less. Then you try and do a little bit of scaling to minimize the impact. The idea is always to try and get as minimal impact as possible. And then subsidies need to be brought in. So even though you've got the costs, you'll see if you had it based on cost, the customer, because this is a category that's maybe your lifeline tariffs, you need to now make a decision on what that rate should be. The regulator also makes decisions on what that rate should be, and then the shortfall then gets added to other tariff categories. And ideally, these should be explicit. The customers paying the contribution to subsidy should actually see this. And on top of this, you would have your municipal surcharges. So what did Eskom propose and NERSA actually approve? So Eskom unbundled the energy charges to reflect how Eskom distribution is buying wholesale energy from the NTCSA. And all the tariffs, except for a few, had their energy charges aligned. So what did this mean? There's still a time of use active energy charge, but removed from the previous one is now this generation capacity charge, which is a fixed charge. And then Eskom also separated out the cost of REAP, or the Section 34 government procurement programs, as a separate charge. So the energy charge got split into 3 components. Then Eskom also proposed time of use changes. And these time of use period changes reduced the morning peak by 1 hour and increased the evening peak by 1 hour. It also reduced the winter rates and had to then, because of that reduction in the winter rates, had to increase the summer rates to become revenue neutral. And then for residential tariffs, the inclining block rate was removed and there was increased fixed charges for the home power and home flex. Home flex is Eskom's time of use residential tariffs. In addition, for municipalities, Eskom actually created a cost pool just for the municipalities. So it added rural and urban munics into one cost pool. So even though it gets calculated in a cost of supply separately, it then got added again into one cost pool. And this was now called MunicFlex. It has the same structure as Megaflex, exactly the same structure as Megaflex, and there was no longer a rural and urban differentiation. So municipalities that were on RuralFlex and NightSave Rural, they now all on the MunicFlex tariff. And they did, Eskom did the same for the small power tariffs, where municipalities have some small power points of supply. They were all combined into one tariff structure, the same as Munich rates, where it combined business rate, land rates, and home power into the same cost pool. The other important thing that's not mentioned on the slide, on the Megaflex tariff structure, there was a low voltage subsidy charge, which pooled all of the Megaflex, including the Munics, into one subsidy pool and subsidized the low voltage and the medium voltage tariff structures. So you can also do that. But for MunicFlex, they did not contribute to the low voltage subsidies now of Eskom's other customers. It only contributes to the low voltage subsidies within the Munich pool, in the Munich cost pool. So let's unpack these proposed changes. So the time of use energy rates themselves actually reduced before the price increase because it now got unpacked into these three components. And the generation capacity charge is meant to cover a small portion of fixed generation costs. It's kind of a standby charge. Eskom proposed a 7% of generation costs to be recovered as the fixed generation capacity charge, but NERSA reduced this to around about 1.4%. So the generation capacity charge is actually a very small component, but did allow Eskom to go up to 30% next year. And this reduction had to be added back to the energy charges, but did not get added to the WEPS rates excluding losses. So this reduced the benefit of wheeling quite significantly. Also, the cents per kilowatt hour legacy charge, which was dealing with the Section 34. Section 34, for those of you that don't know, is the section of the Electricity Regulation Act where the minister makes a determination on who is on the procurement of new power and also nominates the buyer. And in all of these cases, Eskom is the buyer under Section 34. So it's the REAP programs, the gas, and so on. So this also got taken out of the energy charge, so it's also not avoided by wheeling. All the network charges, retail charges, and subsidy charges were reduced before the price increase was applied because, again, the application of the average price increase to all rates meant that energy overall was under-recovering and networks were over-recovering. And then this picture just shows WEPS rates excluding losses, comparing the 24 and 25 Rand values. And you can actually see in the winter months, in peak and standard, there was a slight reduction, even including the price increase. And in the summer months, peak increased and standard period saw an increase. So what steps need to be taken to update municipal tariffs? Firstly, your tariffs must recover the costs. So your Eskom purchases costs and your own distribution costs, and they need to send the right signals. The network and retail costs, and retail could also include your energy purchases, your admin and also your services must be unbundled as far as possible. You need to simplify into a few basic structures, such as Megaflex, Muniflex, and then a suite of tariffs for indigents and include net billing and wheeling options. And update as far as possible to reflect the Eskom changes. And to move away from inclining block rates tariffs, because NERSA has acknowledged the challenges that sit with the inclining block rate tariffs and how the above is going to be structured, in particular dealing with what should be fixed, cannot be avoided, and what is variable is going to depend on customer impacts and also the politics, because at the end of the day, the politics makes the final decision on this. So this picture just shows the purchase costs for a municipality will include generation cents per kilowatt hour and Rand per kVA. It'll include transmission cents per kilowatt hour, which is the ancillary service charge, and transmission, which is Rand per kVA. And then there will be a portion of distribution purchases if you are connected to the distribution grid. And then you will have your own municipal costs, which will be your own distribution costs and your retail costs. So the municipality buys these services from Eskom distribution at Muniflex. In future, it could be at the wholesale level but the structure of the wholesale tariff will align with this. And then you would add your own municipal cost, and you base your tariffs on what they purchase from Eskom and also your own costs. So just touching on subsidies, while we know that tariffs should ideally be based on cost, there's always a need to protect the indigents, and this can be done through cross subsidies. Tariff cross subsidies ideally need to be done through a NERSA framework, because that is what the EPP says, but there isn't such a framework existing at the moment. So when you apply subsidies, some tariffs pay more than cost and others less. They must be transparent, based on the cost of supply study, and then aligned to the municipality's own socioeconomic objectives. However, also need to consider the affordability of those paying the subsidies. If you burden those customers too much, they might have to close down. They might move away to another distributor that has more favorable tariffs. And then non-electricity related surcharges should also be transparent. And this picture then just shows the little blue block is your fixed cost, your blue line in the middle is the cost. Is the tariff receiving the subsidy is the green bar. So their subsidy that they actually receive is the difference between the middle bar and the green bar. And then the top bar is the customer that's actually paying the subsidy. So they are paying more than the cost of supply. So now let's get on to use of system charges and other charges not avoided by wheeling, which we touched on in a lot of repetition yesterday. So use of system charges or network charges, the same thing, are those charges that recover the cost of providing access to your grid and the use of your grid. And they are typically based on the capacity that you supply that customer or the maximum demand. So you've now created a network with capacity in order to supply that customer. And if the customer uses less during certain times of the day, they need to still pay for the fact that that capacity exists. Use of system charges include also ancillary service charges, because those are payable to transmission or the NTCSA in order to give grid reliability. So generators, for example, provide ancillary services. They get ring-fenced into a cost, and this gets passed on to Eskom distribution and to municipalities. Losses is also a use of system charges because it's a cost to deliver that energy over the grid. So I supply, the NTCSA supplies 100 kilowatt hours, or let's say the generator supplies 100 kilowatt hours, but by the time it gets to the customer, because of technical losses, it's only 90 kilowatt hours. Therefore, there's 10 kilowatt hours that you would have to cost as a losses charge. These charges could be unbundled or included in other charges, but ideally should be transparent and be based on this cost of supply study. And they always should be payable when there's wheeling and cannot be avoided. So also any other non-avoidable charges like subsidies and surcharges, and for example for Eskom, the legacy charge is not avoided by the subsidy charge. You could have use of system charges that could be fixed or variable based on kilowatt hour. Even if they're based on kilowatt hours, though, they are not avoided by a wheeling transaction. And then this working session on the use of system charges is going to be done a little bit later. So components of the tariff and the impact on wheeling. Use of system charges not avoided by a wheeling transaction. Only the energy component all the Web's rate excluding losses and the generation capacity charge component is avoided by excluding losses. So when Eskom does the Web's rate excluding losses, it deals only with energy. So losses are recovered. All energy will flow through the meter, and appropriate charges will be based on the energy that goes through the meter. So if there's a subsidy charge based on kilowatt hours, that still gets raised, even if a portion of that is wheeled. The other important thing is in terms of the impact on wheeling. So there has been a negative impact on the wheeling benefit by the changes that Eskom made on their tariffs. And the changes to the time of use period did reduce the benefit of solar. In particular, the move from the 3 hours peak in the morning to the adding an extra hour at the end of the peak period in the evening. So if a customer was wheeling in a peak period, they get a much bigger benefit. Their off-taker gets a much bigger benefit because they are offsetting very expensive peak energy. But the reduction of the peak hour in the morning has also reduced the benefit of solar. And for example, the reduction of the time of use rates in winter has reduced the benefit of wind. And then this generation capacity charge, pulling this out of the energy rates and effectively reducing those energy rates, also reduced the benefit of wheeling. I still personally believe there's still a good business case. It's not as favorable as it was in the past. So let's now just do an example of use of system charges and other charges not avoided by wheeling. So if we look at this top where it says no wheeling, you've got your energy purchase costs. So the top is your cost bar, your NERSA approved costs. Energy purchase costs, you've got your energy losses, you've got your distribution network costs, and you've got your retail costs. That fully makes up your NERSA approved costs. Then if you have no wheeling, you might have an energy charge that's not fully exactly structured by the top bar. Your energy charge will include losses and maybe will include a contribution to subsidies on all delivered energy. You might have a network charge that looks slightly different, and your retail charges. This is just showing you that you might not have a fully unbundled tariff that looks exactly the same as your cost drivers or your cost structure. And then you might have your municipal surcharge. So then you would have your NERSA plus council approved tariff. Now, when you have wheeling, there's a portion that is now in the little dotted block, which is avoided. It's the WEPS credit mechanism. So your energy purchase costs from Eskom now is reduced by this little block. You still have energy losses, you still have distribution network costs, you still have retail costs. So your energy charge now, including losses and contribution to subsidies on all delivered energy, your network charge, your retail charge, and your Munich surcharges, still recover all your costs. So these are charges that are not avoided, so there's no revenue loss. So the Munich purchase costs from Eskom are reduced by wheeling, and for wheeling, there are charges not avoided, even if there's not fully unbundled tariffs, because using Eskom NERSA's method 1, this example is saying, let's say your tariff structures are not perfectly unbundled. You still are protected if you use method 1 of NERSA's rules. The off-taker still remains liable for all the charges based on the delivered energy, including the wheeled energy, and the distributor is kept whole as they recover all their costs, including the cost of losses. And that's the end of my presentation. Over to you, Sanoa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shirley. I think you've of course delivered on the tariffs 101 very comprehensively. So I think let me take just two questions, colleagues. Why am I taking two questions? It's because we need to just have a quick breather and then have our next session. Our colleagues really need to come in at 10:15. Is it 10:15 what? 10, right? So let's take two questions. Luandile, I saw your first question. Other questions, colleagues, please use the chat. Shirley will be with us in the afternoon in our use of system charges workshop. So if you've got more questions for her, please bring them to that session. All right. The chat also throughout the day, post many questions. Luandile, you've been recognized, sir. Over to you.
Good morning, Snawo and the colleagues. No, I think it was a mistake, Chair. Thanks. Apologies for that.
No problem. I see one question on the chat. In order to provide certainty, reduce risk for customers or generators, how often ideally should tariffs be revised? Shirley, first question there.
Ooh, that's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, you'd like to revise your tariffs every year, but that's not possible. Just in terms of the process to do a cost of supply study and to submit to the regulator and for the regulator to consult, you know, that's an 8-month process. You'll be busy every year just doing tariff design. So I think it's, again, part of your strategy. I would say at least at a minimum every 5 years, or when NECOM changes its structures. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it in the next year, maybe the year thereafter. Ideally, every 3 years. So it's just the amount of work that's needed to do a cost of supply study. But I think it's when you're starting to see also you understanding your own grid, and when you're starting to see things are really, really changing, you could do it even sooner. I think the EPP says at least every 5 years. I mean, just making a time of use change. The time of use changes that NECOM made has actually had quite a negative impact on some of the larger customers who shut down in winter to do maintenance. So you've also got to be careful, you know, to do it too often as well, or not to give customers enough time to respond. Because it's no good making a change because you want customers to respond, but they can't because they have to change operations and, you know, and so on. Thanks.
Excellent, Shirley. So 3 to 5 years, or when a significant tariff change occurs upstream, which is at NECOM, or maybe a huge diversification of your energy mix. Jermaine, you can go ahead. Colleagues, please use the chat. Ask as many questions as possible. There's no stupid question here. It's a Tariffs 101 session. It's meant to answer each and every question. All right, over to you, Jermaine.
Thanks, Noah. Thank you, Shirley. That was very informative. Much appreciated. Listen, just maybe you can help me trying to demystify what is happening in my head based on this one slide about the use of system charges, etc. So you mentioned that NECOM, obviously they unbundled their tariffs now, and there was a change in the way they approach the tariff structure by taking out some of the costs, which makes sense. Right now you said it had a negative impact on the business case for wheeling right now. When they did the unbundling and the restructuring, did you guys see the actual impact on the municipalities who already were involved with wheeling and the revenue neutrality of that, if that makes sense. So ESCOM made a change. Maybe the municipality was not on, how can I put it? Maybe the municipality didn't change it as in the same way that ESCOM changed their tariff structure, but they were wheeling already. Was the revenue neutrality still maintained in that municipality, or was it actually negatively impacting them? I hope I'm making sense. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to demystify this thing in my head.
Yeah, no, sure. So if the municipality has aligned with the ESCOM WEPs less losses, less generation capacity charge rates, which I'm assumed they have, because that is published by ESCOM, even for the Munichs. So then they would be sitting in the same revenue neutral position. I don't know what municipalities actually did, but if they aligned with method 1 of the NERSA rules, then they would have also reduced their wheeling rates.
Yeah.
To be aligned with what ESCOM would have put on their bill.
I think, Jermaine, I think next, the session that's going to come after this one, I think you'll see it a bit practically, why it wouldn't necessarily negatively affect the municipality, because the use of system charge is very much informed by your physical assets. And if there is a change, of course, on the upstream, on the energy component, then if you use that methodology number 1, there shouldn't be much of a difference. But let us see that in the next session. Shirley, I've got a couple of questions on the chat. As the colleagues go to tea and stretch, and they return at 10:15, please kindly respond to them so that when colleagues come back, they can see the chat and see the response to each individual question. Is that okay?
You want me to respond on the chat?
Yes, just on the chat.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right. Thank you, Jermaine. I'm hoping you're sorted there, but the next session should help. All right. Colleagues, we are a bit behind time. Let's just take a quick leg stretch. Let's drink a cup of something, and most likely water. Let's return 10:15 for our next session, which is now we look at the cost of supply in detail. And of course, please, Shirley is still with us at the end of the later on in the day in our use of system charges session. Then bring all of your questions there, right? All right, see you in 5 or so minutes, 7 minutes. Thank you. All right. Happy to see some interesting debates on the chat. Thank you for those responses, Shirley. Also, just to note that all the training material, colleagues, including these videos, will be shared to you. Will be shared with you, including the presentations, the draft documentation. So you shouldn't worry much about that, right? So you can always revisit the course. So as I segue into the next presentation, which is important. Some key pointers from Shirley's presentation was that, of course, for Unix to move in the direction of setting use of system charges, there are some fundamental things that need to be done. For example, a cost of supply study is essential, so that we can move into unbundling, where we can have different costs for different cost drivers. We move towards simple tariff setting, simplifying our tariffs. Also, our costs must reflect the changes that happen upstream. So the ESCOM changes. And then, of course, the tariffs we implement have customer impacts. So we must be sensitive to that in our art, and consider subsidies and ensuring these are explicit at all times. And of course, there are political sensitivities around tariff setting. So now the next session, really, colleagues, is now to say, all right, Shirley's told us about a cost of supply study. So then how can we practically use cost of supply studies to then inform these use of system charges, or to inform the methodologies in our regulatory documentation? So we've got our colleagues from Ricardo on the line. I hope so.
Yes.
Ricardo, of course, has been very instrumental in the development of the cost of supply tool that we have been using recently. Of course, developed by a multi-stakeholder team, but them coming in, really, they've introduced the thinking that utilities are run, you've got a wires business, you've got a retail business, but I'll let Ricardo get into those details as the experts, and then we can then engage. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Sinao, and good morning, colleagues. Pleasure to talk to you this morning. As you might have guessed, I'm not Sarisha Ojagir, who was listed on the schedule. I'm Thomas Amram. I'm the business area manager for power at Ricardo. I've worked on a number of cost of service studies around the world, but especially in South Africa in those last few years. And I will tell you a bit more about cost of service modeling in the specific context of virtual wheeling. The first thing to say really is that throughout this presentation, I'll make reference to the cost of service model, the standardized cost of service model. And in case that's not clear, I'm making direct reference to the model that is available on the embedded generation resource portal that we have developed at Ricardo together with SEA and in close collaboration with quite a lot of you actually and municipalities across South Africa, and is available for free online with all sorts of training material that is made available on the portal. So why are we having this discussion? First and foremost, why does it matter that we pay attention to reflecting wheeling transactions accurately when we do a cost of service study? Well, because the default position is to do either one of two things. One, what we've called all in here, as in ignore the fact that specific wheeling transactions are happening, or that some of your customers are transitioning from regular to wheeling only customers. The problem when you do this is that you overestimate cost that then need to be split and disaggregated amongst all of your customers, especially the cost of purchasing power. So you end up with everyone on the system potentially paying a higher tariff than they should. And that leads to, of course, a very difficult position and arguably one that is not compliant with cost of service regulations. On the other end of the spectrum, you could just decide to take all of those customers out altogether, or that the portion of transactions related to wheeling rather than regular procurement is taken out entirely from the model. But if you do that, then you are underestimating the impact of those customers specifically on the network, and that might mean that other customers will have to pay more for the use of the network, even though they don't use the network anymore than before the wheeling transaction kicked in. So those two ends of the spectrum are not good, either for customers or for the utility, and therefore there needs to be a more refined approach, more sophisticated, that helps in making sure that the right level of cost are reflected onto the right customer classes. So that's why we're having this conversation in the first place. Now, this isn't quite a straightforward problem to solve, and that's because of the nature of flows that we're trying to reflect in those cost of service studies. There are a number of flows, physical and financial, between NECOM and municipalities, between municipalities and customers, and for those that are procuring directly, between those customers and generators, suppliers that they procure from. Those flows are both of a physical nature, elections flowing through the network, and financial. There's a price and there's a contract associated with those flows. We have to look at those two types of flows almost separately when we consider the impact of wheeling. On a physical level, especially for customers, and we'll talk about different types of wheeling in a minute, but especially for customers that are contracting with suppliers located outside of the network of the municipality, there is no impact on physical flows on the network. What is metered at the boundary between the Munich and NECOM will remain mostly unchanged. However, the financial implications are very different, right? Because there will be a share of that physical flow that will no longer be the Munich's responsibility, and where the responsibility financially is transferred onto the customer. And that is, the genesis of virtual wheeling, and how it came about is by understanding that there will be a mismatch, in those situations between physical and financial flows, and we need to make sure that we're accounting correctly for both physical and financial flows when we're doing wheeling related adjustments in cost of service studies. So I've mentioned that we're really talking about two types of wheeling, and I've used those two types being used interchangeably when they have fundamentally different implications on the financial and on a physical level. What we're calling type A in that presentation is, what you will commonly know as virtual wheeling type situation. And that's a situation where the customer is within the boundary of the municipal network and is contracting with a supplier located outside of that boundary. And so that's what we're going to call type A. But arguably, that is not the only route for customers to contract power directly. There's also a route where the customer can quite simply contract, on a kind of financial perspective, a contract with a supplier that is located within the boundaries of the same municipal network as them. And hopefully you see how my earlier point on physical versus financial becomes quite relevant here, because in type A, you know, there are some significant financial implications, but on the physical level, the interface between the municipality and NECOM remains unchanged. Whereas in the type B case, the interface between the municipality and ESCOM will be changed, because they will need less to purchase less energy from ESCOM, and there will need to be less energy flowing through the boundaries of their network, because it's taken care of from the inside, if you like. So the first point is that it's not so much about accounting for willing in cost of service studies. It's accounting for respectively type A willing and type B willing, because you'll see that the guidance that we give on how you account for each of those two types of situations is quite different, and rightly so. As I mentioned, implications on the physical and financial level are different by nature. Just with the spirit of making that presentation as kind of interactive as possible, and before going into the, how do you do this, and how do you account for this in cost of service studies, I just wanted to open the floor and see whether there were sort of any immediate thoughts, questions, clarifications needed on the background that's been set. If not, then I might go on.
Before you proceed, let me make sure that at least I understand what you're saying.
Of course.
So of course, what you're saying is that how we consider or how we account for wheeling in cost studies really depends on the physical connection, where the physical connection of your generator is, right? Because the physical connection then determines also the financial flows, right? That is
and physical, yeah,
physical and financial flows. So then when you show us in the cost of supply study, you will then look at both scenarios and how to account for both.
Exactly.
All right, cool.
And I guess that's also a reminder to make sure that we do not restrict the question of how to account for wheeling to purely virtual wheeling. Virtual wheeling is, of course, part of the problem concern that needs solving, but it would be improper to neglect the emergence of type B situations, because they equally have an impact and should have an impact on how we account for cost on the system. Okay, I'll probably move on to a step-by-step guidance. At a very high level, what are the three main macro steps of the process? First, and that's by far not going to be the easiest one, understanding, in a nutshell, understanding what's going on the system, understanding the nature of wheeling / use of system transactions, how large they are, which customers are involved, and how that's likely to evolve into the future. Because remember, a cost of service study is a forward-looking study. Understanding what's going on right now is not enough. It's also important to make informed forecast on what might happen in the future. The second stage, again, high level, is to reflect the nature of those transactions into the cost of service model, into the standardized cost of service model. And lastly, to set rates in a way that is set rates for those willing customers in a way that is compliant with the NERSA willing rules, again, assisted by the model. So we're going to go through those stages. We've broken them down into 5 steps. Actually, the willing characterization, what's happening now, the future forecast, what might happen in the future, the step 3 and 4, reflecting the nature of those transactions onto the model, respectively for type A and type B. And finally, to use the model to set rates in a way that is compliant with regulations. So let's go through each of those steps. So first of all, the characterization of current and estimated future willing. We're not going to do a very numerical step-by-step process. There will be sessions in the future, especially with municipalities, to go and dive more into this, but that will take place over a longer period of time than what we've got this morning. So on a conceptual level. So as I mentioned, first, the willing characterization. What's happening now on the system? First step, first and foremost, and going back to my slide from a few minutes ago, first understanding which customers currently supplied by the municipalities are willing or planning on willing, if you like, and which ones or which portions of the consumption from those customers fall into the type A that I've mentioned before, so virtual willing, and which portion of those consumptions fall into the type B, which is contracted from within the boundaries of the network. And the same customer might very well be type A on a portion of the consumption and type B on another share of the consumption, and supply electricity purchased by the municipality on the remaining share. So there might be hybrid customers, but we want to make sure that we account for those share of electricity consumption separately. Then, for each type of customer, for each type of portion of customers' consumption, estimate the current sales, those current metered sales, to each of those type of customers. And we're only talking about the component of those sales that is willed. When that's possible, using actual data is, of course, the preferred solution. If that's not possible, then we can use proxies to estimate what those sales may be or might be in the future. That's the present. That's what's happening right now. Now, if we look forward, because as I mentioned, a cost of service study is leveraging, as accurate as possible forecast going into the future, then we need, for each of those customers that we've identified in the first step, to estimate sales forecast, and therefore the extent to which willing transactions might increase in the future, and how many more willing customers there might be with similar levels of consumptions. So that leads to forecast in terms of how much will be willed under type A and type B respectively across the network. That's what's metered with the customer. We also need to understand implications in terms of energy purchase requirements, and the main difference between what might be sold metered at the customer's premises and supply requirements is losses. So understanding again what will be the implication of willed volumes onto energy purchase requirements by using an appropriate energy loss factor. Again, those steps, because of the way that the model is structured, are very much guided and assisted throughout the calculation process. But the point is, one requirement is to understand not just what might be metered at the customer's premises, but the implications that this might have on the system as a whole, including losses, including by season and by time of use period. So the more granular we can get, then the more accurately cost can be calculated and allocated between customer classes. So that's step one. Hopefully I haven't lost you all by now, but step one is to, again, characterize what's going on, what might happen, with a specific emphasis on type A versus type B willing. Now we've done this, we can open the model, the standardized cost of service model, and reflect what we've just estimated respectively for type A and type B. So when we look at type A, virtual willing, there are really two things we need to do. One, we need to make sure that we're accounting for the virtual willing credit that the Munich is likely to receive from NECOM as a result of those willing transactions taking place, right? So that's a financial volume, that's a financial adjustment that needs to be made. And you know, we've added a quick calculation tool onto the model that helps in calculating what that credit will be in the future, knowing what the total energy requirements from willing customers is, what might be the percentage split by season and by time of use, the rate that would apply to calculate that credit, which is understood to be the WEB's rate, and what that rate might, evolve into in future years, or how it might increase in future years. And that helps automatically in calculating and estimating willing credit forecast. So again, on a financial level, that is an adjustment that will come into the OPEX forecast as a negative OPEX, if you'd like, into the financial inputs into the model. So that's the rent side of things. That's the financial side of things. But we need to make sure that the physical flows are also reflected accurately. So the right way to do that is to make sure that the portion of sales that relates to willing is accounted for separately in the model and into a willing customer class. So the model offers the option to flag whether or not a customer class is a regular customer class or whether it's a willing customer class. And the main difference lies in how the cost will then be allocated between the various customer classes. So it is essential to disaggregate and extract the portion of sales that relates to type A willing, virtual willing, and put it into a separate customer class that will flag to the model as being a willing customer class. So that's what we do for type A, and that's it. We just need to worry about type B now, and we'll just get to calculate the rates. For type B, again, type B, we're looking at customers who are supplying a share of their consumption from within the network. So in those cases, the flows between NECOM and the municipalities are not impacted whatsoever on a kind of financial basis. What's metered is what needs to be paid. So we need a different approach to account for those type of willing transactions. One, we need to make sure that the model understands that the energy that is needed to supply those customers comes from within the network and does not come from NECOM. So to do that, we're essentially asking the model to set up a new source of power within the network that is available to the municipality at a cost of zero. Because again, we're looking at it from the perspective of the municipality. So from their perspective, there is, a new source of power within the boundaries of the network that is supplying electricity to those type B customers and at no cost to them. But it's essential to do that because the model needs to understand that going forward, the municipality no longer needs to buy electricity from NECOM to supply those specific transactions. They will be self-supplied. Yeah. So on a physical level, we need the model to understand that there will be less energy that will need to be purchased from NECOM, but nonetheless that this energy will be flowing through the network, and that's why we need to set such a source with a cost of zero. So that helps in solving part of the equation. But at the same time, and in the same way that we've done for type A, we also need the model to understand that there will be a portion of electricity consumption from legacy customers that will now be self-supplied, procured directly, and so create a new customer class that will be flagged to the model as being a willing-only customer class, and will cover the portion of transaction related to type B. Yeah. And not from a financial perspective, you will see there's no, rent adjustment in this, because, there is no adjustment that needs to be made on the financial flows between NECOM and the municipality, considering that the metered sales will continue to be reflective of financial contracts. Yeah, so those are the types of adjustments that we need to do for type A and then type B, respectively. Is there any specific question on this before I move on to the final step, which is to set cost reflective rates?
Maybe in the absence of questions, I can ask one. So of course, in this exercise, you are referencing a specific tool, but would you say that these general principles are true regardless of the tool that you use, the approach itself? It's still valid? Yes, question.
Yes, absolutely. I think, the specific guidance and what you need to do exactly, so what cell you need to change and what tab you need to get into, of course, very specific to the model that we're using. But I believe that those best practices remain valid irrespective of the actual tool that is being used. And again, it goes back to first principles. You need to make sure that you reflect both physical and financial flows separately and accurately. And you need to make sure that you're treating separately and distinctively type A, what we've called type A and type B transactions. I would argue that only type A is what we would call a willing transaction. Type B is just customers that only subscribe to using the network within the boundaries of the municipal's network.
Great, thanks.
Okay, we have now amended the model, tweaked the model in order to make sure that it was taking willing into account properly. So now we may as well leverage the model to help in setting rates, not just to willing customers, but to all of the customers supplied by the municipality. One obviously statement to make going into this is that we're very much in line with the willing rules that have last been released by NERSA, and we'll take you through how to implement either option 1 or option 2 to determine rates applicable to willing customers, both type A and type B. But maybe a quick summary on option 1 versus option 2 and what that means in particular in the context of cost of service modeling. So option 1, wholesale energy credits for willed energy, which I'm going to call top down for the purpose of this session, is essentially setting up top down the rate at which customers will be credited for the portion of their energy that relates to willing transactions. So it's a rate that is essentially set outside, if you like, of the modeling exercise, and is an input into the analysis. We'll talk about it separately, but and as Shirley rightly said in the last session, that is a very simple way to deal with willing, and to make sure that the utility is not worse off. This is not the most accurate way to go about it, but that's the easiest to implement, depending on where municipalities are in the sort of cost of service implementation. So option one, we insert a rate into the model to offset the electricity bill. Option two essentially requires to charge a specific network use of system charge to the portion of transactions associated with willing. But that requires being able to calculate a network use of system charge in the first place. So option one is essentially stating that the willing rate is the applicable municipal rate to which we deduct the NECOM WEPS rate. So to take just a simple numerical example, if we've got the municipal tariff calculated by the model here, and we know what the WEPS rate is for that same year, and we deduct the latter from the former, then the model will tell us what the resulting willing rate is, which is one minus the other. So that is relatively straightforward and leverages the knowledge of the cost reflective rate as calculated in the model and the WEPS rate, which is going to be an input into the modeling exercise. Again, relatively simple to implement, but far from guaranteed that it will be cost reflective to the municipality, that all costs incurred will be recovered and by the right customer classes. A more sophisticated approach, but agreeably more complex, is option two, where the willing rate is a network use of system charge and needs to be calculated from the bottom up. Question: how to leverage the cost of service model in order to calculate and determine those unbundled rates. And this is very much leveraging the principles that Shirley has mentioned in the last session. But on the practical level, how do you do it? Well, in the tariff schedule tab of the model, the only thing that the user needs to do is to go into that box, use the drop down and select wires only instead of wires plus retail. And by doing that, the model automatically removes any element of the cost that does not relate to the use of the network. So on a practical level, if the user has inputted the model correctly already, this is a matter of going onto that drop down and changing from wires plus retail to wires only. And in that example, you will see that, for the type A and type B customer classes that we've just introduced, of course, the wires plus retail and the wires only rates are the same because the model knows there are, no retail cost associated with those categories. And for every other customers, the wires rate, so the use of system charges, are of course much lower than the total rate because it does not account for the share of cost related to energy purchases. Now, what's happening in the background? How does the model come up with those figures? Again, exactly the principles that Shirley has mentioned in the last session, because the model conceptually says for each customer class, I've been able to disaggregate costs between what relates to using my network and building my network and everything else, including purchasing electricity. And within each of those two, what we call business areas of cost in the model, I'm able to understand what relates to the cost of technical losses, the return on assets, depreciation, network repairs and maintenance, and other OPEX. That's what forms the basis of how the model calculates network use of system charges. On the retail section, there's, of course, power purchase cost, the cost of non-technical losses, although that's flexible in the model, and other costs linked to OPEX. And for each of those buckets of cost, if you like, the model calculates an individual charge, sometimes in variable per unit cost, and sometimes in capacitive or fixed basis. Those costs are then aggregated to form the total rate for each customer class, total cost for each customer class, and after subsidies and rate design, that becomes the tariff schedule that I've just showed you in the previous slide. What's happening when you click on the toggle wires plus retail and select wires only is that all of those categories of cost and all of those sub charges disappear from the equation and from the calculation. So that really amounts to calculating charges that are formed from those costs and those costs alone. Yeah. That's what's happening behind the stage. So how do you implement option 2 then, knowing what principles are embedded within the model? Well, the model will give you what the network use of system charge is by just selecting the wires only toggle. And those are the charges that need to be implemented going forward. So it requires, of course, that we're able to input the model at the level of granularity required to get to that level of disaggregation, which is not straightforward. But the model provides with a lot of proxies and guidance in order to do that effectively and in a way that is informed. But the result can be read, instantly once you've done that. So in a nutshell, we've gone through those steps, the characterization, the how to change the model, and how to leverage the model to calculate wheeling rates using either option from the wheeling rules. The next steps for us will be to spend more time with municipalities, and that's within our mandate with GIZ. To go through those steps into more detail, run numerical examples, and it's all ready to go, and we're looking forward to have those interactions to make it more tangible, because I appreciate I've given you a lot of information, some of which is quite complex and new, but kind of doing it together on numerical examples in the future hopefully will be useful, so that you feel comfortable using that guidance yourself in the future. That's all from me, but I'm very happy to take any question.
Excellent, Thomas. This was an excellent presentation. We've discussed these concepts internally before, and it's only now they are sticking on my mind, so I can imagine some of the colleagues in the room. So this is the chance, colleagues, to ask any questions. I know, of course, not all of us are aware of this tool that we are referencing, but we can have questions around, the concepts, the methodology, the approach, and so on. Colleagues, this is the time to ask questions. There we go. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm busy driving at the moment, so I'm going to be careful when I'm driving. Thomas, it's Chris, the advanced cost of supply model, when you do for us. But when you do your calculations on the back end, when you take your wheeling customers out of the equation in terms of the less purchases from NECOM, how does it impact your other customers in terms of their applied tariffs? Because in your model, you actually use the number of customers. And obviously, if you're taking the purchases out, the tariff for the other customers will go up. So how does your model cater for that, please? Thank you.
Great. Omar.
Yeah, good question, Chris. Good to hear from you. The model understands that those new customer classes are willing customers. So it knows that they only matter in the context of the allocation of network cost. The remainder of the cost, and namely the retail cost, are unaffected by this change. And all of the customer-driven cost that you're making reference to, and leverage the number of customers and the weighting factors that we've applied to those, are within the retail bucket, so therefore will remain unaffected. It's true that if we were to identify customer-driven costs that are relevant in the network bucket, then we would need to make sure that we're not double counting any customer.
Aha. Chris has given us a thumbs up while he's driving. Don't let go of the steering wheel, Chris. Are there any other questions, colleagues? Please ask the questions. We only have Toma for the next 5 minutes. Ask the question. There we go. Itumeleng, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thomas, I'm gonna take you to step number 1 and 2 that you earlier indicated. So based on the possibilities of wheeling either solar, wind, or whatever solution there is, that's step number 1 in terms of characterizing. Then comes the step number 2, focusing future physical flows. Now, looking at the solar, it will be during the day. Looking at wind, it might be intimate. Looking at gas and other solutions, they might vary in terms of consistency. Then when you look at your step number 5, the costing thereof, would it also be factored in the tool, or would it look differently to each specific wheeling IPP or solution of that sort? I hope I'm clear. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very clear. A good question. It's true that the characterization of wheeling transactions needs to be cognizant of the schedule of those transactions, and that is very much dependent on the type of generation technologies that is secured. The way to reflect a wheeling transaction with a thermal power plant is different from the way of reflecting the wheeling transaction with a solar IPP, or with a combination of solar, wind, and battery. Ultimately, the source of one truth should be the agreement between the customer and the supplier. That's where you would find schedule. And I'm not suggesting that you go into worrying about kind of balancing implications or settlement implications, because that would add a significant level of complexity into the modeling. But what I'm saying is you can't make it up. As in, there will be probably a process of requesting information from customers that decide to will, and asking specifically those questions: what type of technology, when do you expect, what's the schedule for energy to be coming to your facility, or making assumptions on that basis. So yes, you need to know more than just customer X is willing 10 megawatt. You need to understand what those 10 megawatt are actually made of, because they impact the time of use breakdown of that, how that could impact the system.
I hope you are sorted, Itumeleng. Are there any other questions, colleagues? All right, let me ask 1 or 2 questions on my side. So the first question I like to ask, I think it will benefit the group, is: in my municipality, if I've got 2 customers next to each other, the same type of customer, right? And then one starts wheeling and the other isn't, right? Would their use of system charges be different? So this is when now you are looking at your customers, the charges you are charging them. Should you expect to see a difference in those use of system charges? And what would that difference be? Am I still, colleagues, am I audible? Maybe we've got a me problem or a Toma problem. One of us. Aha. I suspect.
You are very much audible.
Okay. No, that's not a problem. I think Toma had set a timer to say at 11 he disconnects. No problem. Those are questions that we can deal with at a different time. So moving on to the next presentation from Josh, I think we've heard this morning tariff setting principles, which are concepts that we also introduced yesterday. Shirley and Toma, really their presentations complemented each other. So then another thing now is a major concern for municipalities is revenue. We heard yesterday that these approaches lead to revenue neutrality. So then, Josh, it is then your task then to go into a bit more detail of what do we mean now that we've got our tariffs. How do we get to revenue neutrality? Are you around, sir?
Yeah, well, I am here.
There we go. Hi, brother. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, let me get this up. So no, I saw Nick's had a little session, but okay, maybe I've got an old version of the agenda. Nick's after me, which is great. Okay, yeah. Hi everyone. Good morning again. Yeah, lots of detail this morning. The session that I've got planned is actually quite simple. So hopefully it's a good sort of review of Thomas' session and maybe to ask some simpler questions. But yeah, it's focusing on revenue impact of wheeling. Let me just get my things going here. Yeah. Okay, so I assume looks like it's all good my side. So I assume it's all fine. Someone will let me know if there's any issues. Yeah, so it's a very simple calculation, but since there's a sort of big audience, I imagine there's some new people who haven't gone through the wheeling calculations in too much detail yet. Hopefully this is a good sort of revision of. Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry, I started on the wrong slide. I need to start there. Sorry, I don't know why it started in the middle of the presentation. There we go. Still wrong. Sorry, guys, I'm having a bit of a mess here. I'm just going to try one more time. Okay. That's better. Yeah, so it's the revenue impact of wheeling presentation, and we're going to speak through how the calculations are done and the two different methods that Thomas spoke about, the credit method and the explicit use of system charge. So just these three portions of the presentation. First, just to explain again, but in sort of maybe a different viewpoint on the WEPS credit versus use of system charge. And then some billing scenarios, how the billing is done when a municipality is wheeling to a customer, either from NECOM or embedded intra-municipal wheeling, and then the revenue impact calculation. So for some, this might be quite simple presentation, but for others, hopefully, it's good revision. Hang on, why has this gone funny? I'm so sorry. I'm having a bit of a mess. I keep seeing myself. Sorry guys, just give me a second here. That's the one. Oh, I'm really not having a great technology time, am I? Okay. We try one more time. Okay, this is where I was. So the use of system charges. So as I sort of said in Thomas' presentation, and I mean, I think it's all quite clear, we purchase energy from NECOM as a municipality. So that's the blue portion there, and I've called it 4 Rand per kilowatt hour. And then we put a municipal use of system charge or municipal surplus or markup on that electricity and we sell it to the customer. The end customer pays 5 Rand. So the retail tariff that the customer pays in this example that I'm showing here is 5 Rand per kilowatt hour. So the question I wanted to ask to start things off is, how much revenue is the municipality making on each kilowatt hour sold under this example? So the MV time of use tariff that you sell to your customers is 5 Rand a kilowatt hour, and the Eskom Megaflex price, these are just sort of round kind of makeup numbers, is 4 Rand per kilowatt hour. So how much revenue is the municipality so on the one hand, so I think
just
that's
me.
It's a simple
Losing
sort
you a
of
bit, Josh. Or it could just be me. Nick, please confirm.
It's
sorry.
glitching for me also.
I know.
Yeah, it glitched a bit, but I think you're back, Josh.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Gosh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm having issues here this morning. Yeah, so the net revenue is 1 Rand per kilowatt hour. So then when we add these credits, and I know, Tom, I did show the table. So like I said, this is a little bit of a revision, but hopefully it's a useful simplification revision. So now on the right-hand side, we show the situation. On the left is pre-wheeling. That's just normal customers. And now on the right-hand side is wheeling. So now instead of paying Eskom for that 4 Rand, you provide the WEPS credit. Okay, now this is a simplification that the Megaflex on the left is not exactly the same as the WEPS on the right. Something simple as a starting point, and then later Nick's got a spreadsheet and it has all the details and you'll get into it. But conceptually speaking, on the right-hand side, when a customer wheels, instead of paying Eskom the 4 Rand, you give the customer the WEPS credit. And so the net revenue remains that 1 Rand that you made on the left-hand side without wheeling. Now you continue to make it on the right. Is that the use of system charge that we make without wheeling on the left must be the same as the use of system charge that we make with wheeling on the right. So this graph is talking only about the energy charges. So that blue block here on the right-hand side is saying these WEPS credits only affect your energy charges to the customers. All other charges remain the same. So whatever fixed charges, demand charges, capacity charges that you were charging your customer before they wheel, you continue to charge them those when they wheel. And the important thing, like what Megan said, it, but it was in the video on Wednesday, is that the customer's consumption doesn't change. So the off-taker doesn't consume any less energy or kVA. They just continue to run their business, and now they receive these energy credits. So their demand charges and fixed charges and everything remains the same. So yeah, that's sort of how the use of system charges are applied. On a simple conceptual basis, and I'll go through a couple of examples and show the bills of how that's done. So the two different billing scenarios. The first is when the generator is Eskom connected, as shown in this diagram over here. So the power producer, the independent power producer, feeds into Eskom's grid, and then Eskom sells to the municipality, and the municipality sells to the off-taker. So in this situation, the way the billing is done is, let's say the generator supplies 100 kilowatt hours into Eskom's grid in a certain time of day. Eskom then provides the municipality with you have your normal bill, and then you have a second bill that provides these WEPS credits, and the WEPS credits are minus sign, so they reduce the municipality's bill. So Eskom's effectively sold the municipality all this energy, and then at the end of the month they realize, oh, hang on, there's these 100 kilowatt hours that we charged you for, but we didn't generate, so they give you the WEPS credit. Then in this scenario, if you're implementing the WEPS credit method as a municipality, what you do is you charge your customer the the normal bill that they've been receiving, that they would have received at your normal tariffs, and then you apply this WEPS credit for these 100 kilowatt hours. So you pass the WEPS credit along, if that makes sense. So you charge them the full retail tariff, including the use of system charge, and then you only credit them the WEPS credit, which is effectively means that you as the municipality retain your use of system charge. At the bottom here is the WEPS credit for this current financial year, the energy charge, active energy charge excluding losses. Yeah, so it's R5.48 peak and reduces into the other of use periods. The nice thing for municipalities here, ESCOM meters the customer and generates the credits. So use the municipality, it's purely a financial accounting exercise. You just pass the credit from your ESCOM bill onto the off-taker. Here's an example bill. This is now slightly old, but it shows, don't know if you can zoom in, you can sort of pinch in, you can see this is a gen wheeling tariff from the municipality, from ESCOM, apologies. And you can see that the credits applied there are negative. So these are the WEPS credits for the different time of use periods. And then there's also an administrative charge for implementing wheeling. The second billing scenario is when the generator is locally connected. So as we said previously, now the municipality, you need to meter this customer, and you'd need to generate the credits yourself rather than just passing it from your ESCOM account. So in this scenario, if the generator supplies 100 kilowatt hours into the municipal grid, you'd have meter there reading the generator's meter, and okay, we've received 100 kilowatt hours. Now in this case, your ESCOM bill is unaffected. Well, it's only affected because there's a reduction of energy purchases, but your ESCOM account wouldn't reflect any credits because ESCOM is sort of effectively unaware of this scenario in terms of your bill. So the energy that you buy from ESCOM goes down, but it's not reflected as a credit. So use the municipality in this scenario when there's a generator connected in your municipality, you'd need to generate the credits. And so, you charge the customer at their full retail energy price. So you provide the normal bill and then you provide those 100 WEPS credits. So it's a similar situation to previously, except now you just need to generate the credits yourselves. And with the use of the Excel spreadsheet that Nick's going to show, it's actually made this billing process quite simple. So that's really exciting. I'm looking forward to going through it together later. So the revenue impact calculations on a higher level are quite simple, and I think we've sort of shown them with that graph earlier. Hopefully that made sense to people. This is again a simplification of things. So there are slight simplifications, but I think that's intentional just to try and get everyone sort of conceptually on board, because revenue loss is a big concern. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little example, and it's using the same numbers as I did earlier. Apologies if it's a little bit simple, but hopefully the simplification is worth going through, because there's a lot of concern, as I said on the first day, about revenue loss in municipalities around wheeling. So this is to try and simplify things so that we on board that the municipality continues to recover your use of system charges when wheeling, because it's really important. So here's the scenario, this example, the first block without wheeling. So please, let's go through this slowly together. So the customer bill. So first of all, the customer consumes 200 kilowatt hours. Let me make this little red pointer here. Hopefully an example is useful to people. So here the customer consumes 200 kilowatt hours. You charging them as a municipality, your energy price at this time of day is R5 a kilowatt hour. So let's assume it's peak. So the customer owes you 1,000 Rand. They owe you 200 kilowatt hours multiplied by R5 per kilowatt hour. So the energy charge, obviously there's other charges, fixed charges, demand charges, those remain the same, but let's ignore those for now. The municipality owes Eskom for that 200. You need to buy the 200 from Eskom. Again, there are losses. They're not ignored in the detailed calculations, but let's ignore them for now. You need to buy those 200 kilowatt hours from Eskom at 4 Rand a kilowatt hour. So your bill to Eskom is 800 Rand. Then your municipal revenue, net revenue after paying Eskom is 200 Rand. Obviously, you made 1,000, but you paid Eskom 800. So we make 200 Rand. And again, sorry if this is an oversimplification for some, but hopefully it's useful for others. So now when you do this credit method, the credit method works is the customer is now buying 100 hours of wheeled energy. So about 200 Rand here, you minus for those 100 kilowatt hours. So they consume 200 total. Of the 200, one was wheeled. So then they only owe us 6 now. So the customers will 600.
Josh, sorry to interrupt you, Josh.
Yes.
It seems a few people are struggling to hear you, and they suggested maybe turning off your camera. I think it's a bit delayed.
That's frustrating. Sorry, guys.
Thanks.
You can just recap that second scenario for us, please, Josh.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I've switched off my camera. Let me try again. Okay. So the second scenario with the credit method. Let me just get myself made small here. In this scenario, the customer. Okay, so at the top, they were buying.
We aren't seeing your screen.
200.
Just sorry to cut you, Josh. We aren't seeing your presentation there, or is it just me?
Really? No, I mean I'm sharing it. I don't know. Maybe. Gosh, is my internet getting worse here? Maybe I should try and move. I tested it. It's perfect. Sorry.
If you have access to it, Nick, you can flight it on your side just to sort it out quickly.
Is it? How's this now?
Still not seeing it.
Really?
I can get. Oh yeah, it's back.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, that's very delayed. Okay, so my red mouse thing is definitely not going to function. Okay, let me know if it glitches, and then we can flight it from your side, Nick. Sorry about this, guys. Okay, so in the top scenario, we sort of spoke about no wheeling, and the customer owed the municipality 1,000 Rand. The municipality paid Eskom 800 Rand. And the municipal revenue was 200 Rand. I hope we're all comfortable on this scenario. If anyone has any questions on the first without wheeling calculations, please let me know. Feel free to jump in. With the credit method, I'm going to wait a bit. Hopefully that's come through now, the second block. The credit method, now the customers consumed 100 kilowatt hours of wheeled energy. So they get this credit. If you see in the customer bill is 200 multiplied by the full retail price, which is 5 Rand, and then minus the 100 Rand of 100 kilowatt hours of wheeled energy multiplied by 4 Rand, which is the WEPS credit. So now the customer only owes the municipality 600 Rand. The municipality also receives this credit from Eskom. So on your Eskom account, it'll go down by that same 100 kilowatt hours multiplied by the WEPS credit. So instead of previously owing Eskom 800 Rand, the municipality owes Eskom 400 Rand. And the difference between the green and the blue is the municipality's net revenue. So it remains at 200 Rand. I hope that makes sense. The third method is with an explicit use of system charge. So the way this is done is instead of overcharging the customer and then providing a credit is you separate out wheeled energy. You only pay the R1, which is the difference between the two, the R1 use of system charge, and then normal retail municipal energy, you pay the full R5 retail energy price. So there's no credits, there's no minus signs in the use of system tariff approach. It's just 100 units of energy at the municipality's retail price, which is R5 plus 100 units or kilowatt hours of energy that were wheeled, where you pay the use of system charge, which is R1, and so you owe the municipality R600, which is effectively the same as the credit method. And the municipality owes ESCOM the same R400, and then the municipal net revenue rand. Hopefully that's not too messy a calculation and people are able to follow, because this is really the crux of the revenue impact story. So if anyone has any questions, we have some time, I believe. So please feel free to ask questions here, because after this. So I just really want to encourage people to make sure that we together on this is the sort of foundational concept of the credit method. In absence of any questions, we can keep going along. At the top here, I've shown, this is now last year's WEPS credit method, but this is the WEPS credit method, the WEPS credit slides. This is Cape Town's MV time of use charges, also in the same year. And then, so this is the time of use prices that MV customers pay in Cape Town. And then there was this is the use of system charge. So Cape Town doesn't do the credit method, they do the use of system charge. But it works out, you arrive at cents, which is that use of system charge there. So the use of system charge is just the retail tariff less WEPS, which means this is the sort of revenue neutral, surplus neutral approach. Yes, there are some longer term revenue questions like was raised in the previous session. And on an energy basis, in the short term, this is the sort of making sure that you either do the WEPS credit method, or if you're going to do the use of system charge method, then your use of system charge should be equal to your existing retail tariffs minus WEPS, to make sure that you're not losing revenue when customers wheel energy. And if you do this, then it's entirely revenue neutral. So it's quite a simple calculation, quite a simple presentation, but hopefully useful to recap and go through that at a high level. And then I know for many people, including myself, the only way to believe this is to get into the numbers and put your ESCOM purchase prices in there, and that's really the plan for this afternoon. And yeah, there's a great Excel spreadsheet to calculate that revenue pre-wheeling, revenue post-wheeling. But yeah, conceptually, this is the story. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, if people have any questions, please feel free. Apologies for my glitch. I don't know if it came through okay now, or if it was still quite glitchy.
No, it worked out, Josh. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation, and I like that you've used very simple examples, and I'm going to open it up for questions, Josh, because I think this is as simple as you can get really in terms of understanding the revenue impact, right? So if colleagues are still unclear even at this stage, I think this is the time to ask the question: what is it that is unclear to you? What is it that you are seeing in this presentation that is not complemented by previous presentations? Please, colleagues, I think we'll take a break at past. So we've got 5 minutes while Josh is here. Any questions, or was it clear? While we wait for a question, let me start, Josh. So, of course, I think one of the main concerns around wheeling is definitely revenue impact. And what we are showing us is that actually, even with the WEPS credit method, you still maintain revenue neutrality. So would you say that as municipalities open up wheeling in their various jurisdictions, this is an approach that they can use? Of course, it's also in the rules, but would you say, based on your extensive experience in the space, that this is sort of a good starting point, the WEPS credit method?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Thanks. Now, yeah, I think the recommendation is to start with a WEPS credit approach. Yeah, it also simplifies billing, and especially for ESCOM connected generators, we're just passing the credit along. It makes things really easy, and it means that we can get wheeling in the short term. And as we've seen, it is revenue neutral. So there's no reason to complicate things. I think if ESCOM moves to a different billing approach, then for an ESCOM connected generator, I think for the municipality to align with ESCOM is really a method in which you reflect that on, because you're effectively passing on the credit. Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to start with the WEPS credit, to my mind. I don't know what others in Bernard might think.
Cool. Bernard, over to you.
Yeah, I see Josh is now Joshua, so he's now grown up, and we aren't allowed to say Josh anymore. So just as I'm thinking now, it might be useful for us to come up with a pros and cons list for the two different options. I mean, I'm very much in agreement that for most municipalities, the WEPS credit implicit method is the right one, but I'd like to be able to prove that by saying, here's what you give up by going in that direction, but here is what you gain. And it would mostly be like there's a lot of simplicity and less risk in the implicit one, where there's maybe more complexity, more risk, but also then more control in the explicit one. So that's maybe something that we could spend a bit of time on at a later stage. Thanks.
100% agreed, Bernard. Agreed. And also, my opinion really is all municipalities now are required to submit a cost of supply study, in support of their tariffs. And most municipalities generally use the tool that Thomas was referring to. And in that tool, one can accommodate both approaches. So it would be nice to have those pros and cons. And of course, we've seen in Josh's presentation that there is revenue neutrality there. So this is this is one of the biggest concerns, colleagues, and I'm not sure why I'm not getting enough questions, because I sent an evaluation form before the training Nick did, and one of the questions there was like, what are the concerns around wheeling? And the main one was municipal revenue. So we've had 3 presentations this morning on that particular matter. I'm hoping the concerns, I'm going to ask the question in the morning, do you still have concerns? But if you do, let's ask Josh while he's on the line, so he can share his experience. Jabulile, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a revenue guy or a person. Maybe I might not understand some of the things, but don't we make a little bit of profit out of what we are selling? For example, the example that you've made, George, to say we are buying with 4 rand from ESCOM, then we are selling it at 5 rand. Or I don't know, maybe I might be lost somehow. Aren't we making a little bit of profit? Aren't we losing if we are no longer selling what we used to buy from ESCOM and selling to a customer, if now the customer is purchasing straight from the other private generator. And we're losing somehow the money there. Please, can I have clarity on that one?
Excellent. These are the questions that we need. Over to you, Josh.
Hi, Jabulile. Nice to hear your voice. Yeah, so there is definitely profit being made. I mean, profit is, some people caution against profit because you're a government, but definitely a surplus, or I mean, in simple terms, it is profit. Yeah. So yeah, you do make profit, and municipalities are entitled to make that surplus because you need that to fund further infrastructure investment and yeah. So
Yeah, losing you there, Josh.
Oh golly, let me turn off this video. I'm so sorry, guys.
Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, the bottom line, Jabulile, is you must definitely continue to make that profit when you, or surplus when you sell wheeled energy. But the great thing about the municipality's business model is wheeled energy still requires the use of the grid. So when you need to move that surplus or profit onto your grid charge, instead of it being thought of as on selling. So when they use your grid, which they do for wheeled energy, then you still charge them for that. So in you remember an example that I said is you buy at 4 Rand, you sell at 5 Rand. In that 1 Rand includes everything. Now, it could be that you buy at 4 Rand and sell at 6 Rand, and then there's 2 Rand. Now, you need to keep making that 2 Rand and still charge them for that 2 Rand on every kilowatt hour that they will. And in that markup must be your salaries, your surplus, your admin charges, everything that you're currently making. So if you're currently buying Eskom energy at 4 Rand and you're selling it to them at 6 Rand, that 2 Rand is what you're making from them today without wheeling. And that 2 Rand is what you must continue to make from them when they do wheel. I hope that makes sense, Jabulile.
Okay, no, I think it does make sense to say whichever way, even if it's that little profit, then whichever, even if we are doing a wheeling or we are buying from Eskom, we'll still make that difference, even if it's next to nothing, but that difference will still make it. Okay, no, thank you.
Exactly.
In that case, I think I'm fine.
Yeah, thanks, Jabulile. So some people like to or think that municipalities are currently just wheeling Eskom energy to the customers and charging them the 2 Rand markup on Eskom energy. And now tomorrow when they start wheeling, you're just wheeling them private energy, but you still make your 2 Rand markup. So yeah, it's a thing to get your head around. But yeah, I think I think the bottom line is that wheeling customers are not entitled to avoid any municipal charges because those charges are part of the cost of using the grid. And whether you're wheeling or consuming Eskom energy, they must pay for the use of the grid. Yeah. Thanks, Jabulile. Thanks, Sanal.
Excellent, Josh. Thank you so much for your presentation and your input, and simplifying the concepts for us to better understand. Colleagues, please use the chat for more questions. I know Josh will still be around with us later on, so if you've got more questions for him, we can use those sessions. But for now, let's take a break and return at in 15 minutes it's actually 12 minutes at 11:45 and return and let's have a chat with Eskom and let's find out how they've been doing within their part of the world. Thank you so much. See you in 12.
camera, I try.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We still have a great participation, north of 110 people. I hope you enjoyed your tea. So the next session, as I've indicated here in the agenda, is an ESCOM wheeling implementation case study. Should be presented by Aisha. I think all of us we know ESCOM is an important stakeholder in wheeling, but also they are quite far ahead compared to maybe some of our units. So there's a lot to learn from our stakeholder. So it's then great to have that conversation with them and also hear from their perspective, what does wheeling mean to ESCOM and what is it exactly? Just to confirm, do we have Aisha on the call?
Hi, so now, yes, you do have me on the call.
Excellent, excellent. I'll leave the stage and then you can take it from here.
Thanks. Good day, everyone. So I'm going to share my presentation, but I will also be switching off my camera at some stage since bandwidth in Cape Town is not always that good. Just as a way of introduction, I'm Aisha Hardin from ESCOM. I am in the Retail Center of Excellence. I'm the National Customer Acquisitions Manager. I design processes and systems for ESCOM, or distribution at least, on the retail side. So I'm also heading up the ESCOM Wheeling Office for the interim, and that's what we're sharing today. So just confirm for me, you're going to see my presentation coming up in the next few seconds, if you can see it, and then I'm going to go through that.
We can see, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So please, slow me down. I tend to talk very fast. From an ESCOM perspective, I am going to introduce the way ESCOM does wheeling, not necessarily touching on tariffs, etc., but more in terms of process and implementation on the operations side. That is what the presentation today is about. So from a distribution side, we have 3 wheeling options. At least 2 are available right now. We are currently piloting the 3rd option. The option that has been available for the last decade or so has been traditional wheeling, which is the one-to-one wheeling. The wheeling from an ESCOM generator to an ESCOM off-taker, contracted, amended contracts, etc. We have just introduced virtual wheeling at the beginning of the ESCOM financial year. Virtual wheeling is basically wheeling on any grid at any level, which means a customer connected on the LV side, on the MV or HV, whether they are connected on the ESCOM grid or Munich grid, can participate in this program. It is a lot more, I make it sound a lot more simplistic than what it is, but virtual wheeling is a new concept. We are rolling out, or at least the current phase 1 implementation is is active. We are expecting to change up some of the rules and some of the allowances come phase 2, which should hopefully happen before the beginning of the new financial year. It just means the expansion of this product with more allowances on the rule set that currently is there. Then we're bringing in portfolio wheeling, which, if you understand traditional wheeling in Eskom, is allowed for only customers connected on medium and high voltage networks. Portfolio wheeling would be that on steroids. So portfolio wheeling is traditional wheeling on steroids. It will allow for the aggregation of energy across multiple, allocations of generator energy to multiple entities across the country on the Eskom network. So before, if you are in a particular geographic boundary, which traditional wheeling is about, it limits you to in contracting to just that geographic boundary and that point of supply. Portfolio wheeling won't do that. It will allow an entity with multiple offtake points across the country to actually, under that contract, wheel energy to all of its points of supply or selected points of supply. Both portfolio and traditional wheeling will be or is currently intended to be offset on the bill. So it is a monthly, sorry guys, it is a monthly reconciliation on the customer's bill at the WEP's losses rate. Virtual wheeling is a retrospective financial transaction. Basically, this means that the customer first pays the consumption bill and thereby not affecting any municipal or Eskom transactions. And a credit is then refunded at the WEP's losses rate to the customer after the customer has paid their bill and etc. So that's a retrospective to the actual transactions, not on the monthly bill. Okay, so those are the 3 wheeling options currently available in the Eskom landscape. This, as I mentioned, is not available yet. It is currently being piloted with a few of our customers that have opted to pilot this particular product. As a result of all of the different options that we are bringing to the table, Eskom has realized there's a need to expand our current environment to accommodate this. Over the last year, our base for contracts for traditional wheeling has increased by 100%. So we have seen a significant rise in wheeling contracts coming through, requests for amendments on existing contracts to enable wheeling. Just let me confirm. Okay, so the current way we do contracts, and this is for traditional wheeling, right? Your IPP has a use of system charges agreement with Eskom, but that use of system charges, as part of the submission, they need to reflect who the off-taker is and what the allocation of energy is going to be to that off-taker. If that off-taker is on that use of system charges agreement and it is now operational, that means the off-taker would have engaged Eskom to come to amend their current existing Eskom supply agreement to allow for the wheeling. But that is initiated by the off-taker. It's not initiated by Eskom. We might have sight of who is listed on that JCOSA. We don't amend agreements without a customer requesting that to be done. So the off-taker will apply to Eskom through their account or customer exec for wheeling. Right now, we allow applications to come through the client services at eskom.co.za website, but we also have an application tool which in the next 6 months will be updated to include applications for wheeling directly. We will also, in the interim, be putting an application tool onto our website. It's a Microsoft-based application tool which we've built for the interim, and that is to enable customers easier access to our products. Once the customer has applied, we will go through the process for evaluation of this request, right? And so what it means is, on a traditional wheeling contract, these certain requirements from a customer side. They have to, we reviewed the deposit. I think we discussed this a bit on Wednesday. The deposit review is required on any contract amendment, on any additional supply request, on any additional service request. So just to keep the deposit up to date and current and relevant, right? So we review the deposit based on the tariffs the customer's on, etc. We have to make sure the customer is on a time of use tariff, correct metering, and all of the above to make to be able to bill the customer. The customer also needs to submit forecasting for his offtake. This is a new rule Eskom implemented in January. It's a 3-year forecast for both the generator as well as the offtaker that is required as part of the sign-off documents or submission documents when signing up for wheeling. That customer, as I mentioned initially, must be listed on the DECOSA. So if the contract is being managed by a third party, so at this moment Eskom is not engaging or contracting with traders, and so a trader is not listed on the contract as a participating party, but they may be listed as a managing agent, and that's the third party. That means we will require certain documents from that trader to share customer information with them, protection of information, confidentiality of account of the actual financial transactions, etc., which means we need a delegation of authority. We'll sign an NDA, all the necessary documents just to cover us from a protection of information perspective. Once the contract has been compiled, it will then be sent back to the customer after it's been vetted by pricing and our legal team. And once that comes back from pricing, the customer receives the contract. They will proof the contract, sign the contract, send it back to Eskom. And only after the contract, which has been signed by the customer, is sent back to Eskom, will Eskom approve the contract. So Eskom is the last party that will engage in terms of sign off the contract. The contract is never signed by Eskom first. It's always signed by the customer. Okay, so after the contract is in place, the systems are updated, right, with the necessary information, as we need to link the generator's allocation and his metering information to the off-taker's account so that that transaction can then be reflected on the bill. And the billing windows for both these parties are then aligned. The current policy for Eskom wheeling, not with the exclusion of virtual wheeling, is that the customers are and the generators are now billed on a calendar month instead of at any time of the month. So they align to a calendar month so that it's easier for us to do the necessary, reconciliations when it comes to generating energy versus demand energy. The bill is then processed and it flows into our normal billing cycle. At this moment, the allocation is pretty manual. We are updating, or the system has been updated, and we're testing the automation of that. And that automation will be kicking in September for allocation of energy. And we did that because with portfolio wheeling, a customer will be allowed to change their allocation on a monthly basis. Traditional customer has a set allocation based on the DECOSA. So we are going to allow variances in how we do wheeling going forward with the new products and services that we are offering. The customer's bill will reflect the energy that was demanded from the network, as well as the energy that was offset through the wheeling and generation agreements. Okay, and that just leads to the monthly bill. Currently, the wheeling contracts or previous wheeling contracts was almost open-ended in terms of there was no end date. Eskom now requires, as of the 1st of January, all contracts to have a start and end date for wheeling. So we've changed up 2 or 3 of the rules within the wheeling space currently to make it more feasible from an Eskom perspective and manageable. So start and end dates for wheeling contracts are now compulsory. Forecasting, 3-year forecasting for both load and generators are required in terms of this new version of wheeling that we are introducing. With that comes a lot of work and a lot of questions from customers and a lot of advisory requests. So we have implemented, our board has approved the implementation of an Eskom one-stop wheeling office, which is the wheeling, which is what I'm heading up at the moment. This office will provide services across all 3 products. Traditional wheeling. What I am managing under the traditional wheeling base right now is I just manage all the contracts for one particular entity, make sure that our customer execs, our officers are enabling these contracts, that the system is updated, etc. On the portfolio wheeling side, the contract will be managed at the wheeling office perspective with the involvement of the operating units that we, for the customer exec involved with this accounts or the offtake points. It is amendment agreements across various different provinces, and therefore it, however, from a customer side, should only be a one-stop. I should not be running around to 9 different operating units, etc. They will only need to be serviced by one customer exec in our office, and they will be doing that. And so it's a liaison role, making sure that all the accounts and all the amendments, the constant changing of the allocation is done in the system and updated and kept, on track. Virtual wheeling will be completely managed by this office. In terms of contracting, engaging with customers, linking the various accounts, the claims process for virtual wheeling will be through this office. We're also accountable for developing systems, processes, changes in contracts, governance, all of that within the wheeling office. The recommendations for that would be done through the office. So process for wheeling as a whole has been already established. We've got instructions, we've got policies, we've got governance processes in place. Our delegation of authority has been updated recently. So all of that forms part of the outputs in this environment. We are busy updating our billing system. We are in testing phase of all the changes we've done. We are also going to introduce a wheeling platform over the next 12 months for external customers, where they would be able to extract data for their contracts, for their meters that they've linked on any wheeling contract. For a customer that's connected on the Eskom side, they'll be able to submit claims, changes, updates on allocations, depending on the type of contract they have, through this wheeling platform. We are in the process of closing the contract with our preferred service provider on that, and we should be in development hopefully by October for the rollout over the next couple of months. Okay, so we received assistance from the NECOM team. Thank you very much for phase 1, where we have developed some material, including customer training material, and then internal staff training material, which we have now developed into an online course on our Eskom's, on our School of Customer Services environment within the Eskom space. We are, as I mentioned before, currently busy with phase 2 rules for virtual wheeling and pilot implementation for portfolio wheeling. To the external customers, we offer the service of advisory services. I have daily meetings with various customers talking about what their options are. We also offer the ability to put together products and service catering to a specific client's needs, not only just focusing on wheeling, but what other options would be best for customer, and how they need to be serviced. And managing their contracts from a central perspective is one of our major outputs. This is what the structure looks like, and a lot of people think, oh, we don't need to actually change up what needs to be done. It can be done under the normal base, but if you are volume contracts that you're dealing with, and it requires a lot more hand-holding than a standard contract, we have implemented the following structure. We're busy populating it. The key accounts manager position we've had 3 rounds of interviews on that already, and then we will be populating it with customer execs. These are the people in charge of the actual contracts, project manager to liaise between the build process, the establishment of the UCOSAs, as well as then to advise the customer on which routes would be, or which products would be best suited to them. We are introducing a billing officer in the retail space for this environment to update the systems to make sure that billing windows are aligned. And we also brought in data specialists in this environment for data mining, querying, reporting, etc. This is important, especially with trying to balance our energy, etc. This entire function falls under the Eskom or distribution energy trader environment, and not in the normal operations environment, right? As well as our contract specialist that has been onboarded. All of these are supported by our centers of excellence, our retail center of excellence, as I mentioned, where I'm from. We design the processes, the systems, etc. We do the national training, as well as the communication to external and internal parties. Our pricing department comes up with our tariffs, as you all know, as well as are critical in vetting contracts, making sure that we are not leaving out passages as we have standard pro formas, but we tend to cut and paste and human error exists. So we go through a vetting process. On the technology side, we have our engineering colleagues engaged on an almost daily basis. I think one of the biggest things we did here was to standardize how we would like the metering to be done when it's a non-Eskom customer, and the typical metering requirements was then aligned with that customer when we did the pilot for virtual wheeling. And so we've got a standard out, we've got templates out for metering, and that metering specifications are going to be rolled out across our various products. So the technology department is important in terms of technical scoping. Our group technology department, which is our IT department, they're the ones who procure our systems based on our business requirement specifications and enable the changes on the systems. So they play a big role in how quickly we actually get the product out on the ground and running. And then obviously our grid access unit. These are this is the team that onboards the IPP in terms of the grid. Right? They're the ones who sign up the IPP, manage the contracts from a UCOSA perspective, ensure that that's in place, commercial operation, and all of that happens. So we work hand in hand with the grid access team, as in the wheeling office, to ensure that we are aware of what's coming potentially, which customers need to have contracts. We'll prompt customers from that perspective and say, we see you listed on a UCOSA. When are you intending to apply for an amendment agreement? So this is the intent of the wheeling office. It is a one one-man shop at the moment with a few staff assisting, but it will be fully implemented before the new financial year. Right. Just this is the process from a high-level perspective on how we contract, right? And then bill the customer. At this moment in time, a customer is allowed to apply through various channels we have in Eskom. The most obvious channel is through the existing customer exec. So if you're on a time of use tariff like Miniflex, Ruriflex, Megaflex, you have a customer exec assigned to you. If you want to wheel, if you're on MV and HV for traditional wheeling, you will engage with that customer exec. They will make sure that everything's in place in terms of the DUCOSAs, your current ESA, your deposits, all of those. They will inform you what needs to be done. Once all of that is done, and they'll go into prepping your contracts, sending that out once it's been vetted, getting the necessary pro formas, completed and populated. They send it to the customer for sign off. Once the customer has signed it off, right, and submitted all the outstanding documents, Eskom will sign, and only then will we start updating the billing system. So nothing in the billing system gets updated till that contract is finalized. This all is kind of manual intervention, manual discussions with the customer. And only once the contract has been signed can we change anything on the billing system. Once the billing system is updated, right, and we've implemented all the contract requirements, we will now link the meter for the generator at the applicable rate based on the agreement, and we will assign the energy as per the DUCOSA to that customer, and on a monthly basis we will now bill that customer. It will be reflected on that customer's bill what the generating energy was that was assigned versus the demand, and that will happen as long as the contract is valid, right? So since there's a start and end date now on wheeling contracts, there will be a start and end date on the system for this contract and this billing period. So from an Eskom perspective, what happens in terms of the wheeling tariffs and contracts? The generator contracts with the distribution, right? Our end users or off-takers to sell the energy through their power purchase agreements, right? We don't need to see the power purchase agreement. We need to know that it's in existence, and we need to know through the DUCOSA we see the allocation of energy that generator has given that customer. The generator then would have contracted with Eskom for connection through the connection and use of system agreements. So that's the connection use of system agreement. So distribution has a DUCOSA, which is the distribution use connection and use of system. There's a transmission use of system agreement, etc., connection and use of system agreement, and a GEN-DIOS, generator use of system agreement. Those are the contracts that they would sign, the generator, and that needs to be in place before we actually enable any kind of wheeling agreement. And then the applicable generated tariffs that we would apply would be GEN-DIOS and GEN-TIOS, meaning distribution and transmission use of system charges. Eskom transports the energy. Now we know it's not a physical transport, it is a financial transaction, right? Because the energy pushed into a particular section of the grid is absorbed by that particular section of the grid, but it is energy credited or pushed into the grid is credits that are flowing, and we need to reflect those credits at an offtake point. The customers would then come forward to contract for wheeling by having the existing supply agreement amended. So when they sign an amendment agreement for wheeling, so it's a GEN wheeling amendment agreement, it doesn't replace the original ESA, the electricity supply agreement. It amends some of the terms of the existing ESA, meaning they will have a supplier other than Eskom providing energy. The rate that this energy is credited at is different from the rate that they get, they pay to Eskom for the demand that they take from Eskom. Okay, so the customer will have the normal ESA and an amendment agreement in place. The customer needs to be, as I mentioned, on a time of use tariff. Therefore, also metering needs to be to enable that time of use tariff. Customers are either up to 50 kilowatts that would be on a smart bidirectional meter, and anything beyond 50 kilowatts, connection or demand would be on a programmable meter with, the CTVT units, etc. The generator or nominated party to provide the percentage allocation of the exported energy, and as I mentioned, that's available on the DUCOSA. Right, the allocation is there. It's part of the agreement. We know, and if that generator reassigns that energy to someone else or wants to add someone new, that amendment to that DUCOSA first needs to occur before we can actually allow for a wheeling agreement to take place. Right, so the contracts for the generator, which we do, a budget quote obviously is to connect the customer to the grid. The QOSA, the connection use and of system agreement, right? The annexures in terms of the nomination to who they will allocate the energy to. Okay. The tariff for the generator is the GENDIOS and the GENTIOS agreement, tariffs. And for the off-taker, it's the electricity supply agreement, which is the standard pro formas in Eskom. Depending on the tariff the customer's on, the terms and conditions of those pro formas are pretty standard, but the rates obviously is as per the existing rates approved by NERSA and the Gen Wheeling Amendment Agreement. Now, this is on traditional wheeling, right? For virtual wheeling and portfolio wheeling, there will be for portfolio wheeling, there will be a Gen Wheeling Amendment Agreement for portfolio, as there are certain terms and conditions on portfolio wheeling which is different from traditional wheeling. And there will also be an overarching contract for the portfolio owner of, so it is outside of the ESA and Gen Wheeling agreement. For virtual wheeling, there is a separate contract, as virtual wheeling does not require the contracted or the off-taker to be the contractee for the actual as the buyer of the energy. And we'll talk about that on next week and Friday when we talk to virtual wheeling. Tariff for load and charges for load customers of Megaflex, Miniflex, Ruraflex, and Munich Flex. This is newly introduced tariff for municipalities that we have, kind of standardized their tariffs. We used to apply over 14 different tariffs to municipalities. Now we apply 3 basic tariffs, and the time of use one is the Munich Flex. And then the tariff for crediting of energy is the Gen Wheeling, and currently WIP's less losses rates. Right. This is what a sample of the bill would look like. Now, it doesn't come in 3 portions. It's one A4 format, but it can be 4 or 5 pages long. So the initial part of your bill is a summary, right? And based on that summary, it will be broken down into these components. So up front, you will get the summary for the demand, you'll get the summary for the gen and the total charges, and then the payments made, etc. And then it's broken down further into, this would be what the generator use of system charges would be under the GenDios environment. This is what we would be reflecting on the bill. The production of energy under the various periods of time, the total energy produced, right? The ancillary service charge, admin charge, and service charge, for example. And then we've got the normal load side of the customer, what the energy was in terms of peak, standard, and off-peak, the various other charges that is applicable on that tariff. And as you can see, these different, the summation there are. Then it comes to the credit of the energy. You will see the, applicable period of time, as well as the charge to facilitate that transaction. You will see we charge an additional administration charge for the facilitation of that transaction. It's part of the contract that the customer signs under the amendment agreement. And then we will show you what was credited, at which rate, and you'll see it's a low season or peak season. Right now we're in high season. So it will be at high season if you're in June to August, low season the rest of the months, and the energy credit that you will then receive. So the bills have been set up to reflect the summation data of the generation and the demand. But you are allowed, and you will see, when we have our metering platform available, which we will be introducing in December, if you have a wheeling contract, you are allowed to then extract your half-hourly data from that platform, because you will be given access. You will be registered on that platform to be able to access your meters on a half-hourly basis for any type of wheeling contract. So where we are right now from an ESCOM perspective, we've developed the wheeling policy is an existing policy, but we have now updated that, and we're in the process of signing off that update to include portfolio wheeling. We have a virtual wheeling policy, which Mr. Baldi on this chat was a large part of. That policy has come up now for review, and we are busy just updating that policy. Our delegation of authority has been updated to include what our board wants in terms of sign-off, authorization, etc. And then all the metering requirements from a technical specification has been finalized and shared on the website for customers to know what ESCOM expects. From a process side and system side, we have finalized the processes for traditional and virtual wheeling. We've submitted the portfolio wheeling processes, and we have written working instructions for contracting on wheeling across all the products, and that is waiting for sign-off once portfolio wheeling gets the go-ahead. The system testing is now in its final stages for automatic allocation of energy and updating of allocations on a monthly basis. The platform we're going to have for wheeling is, as I said, in contracting phase. We're going to go into build in October. And the interim system solutions for virtual wheeling has now been finalized through the various platforms. We're using Azure databases and Microsoft Pages, Views, etc. And this will be on the website as well once we get the licensing secured. The metering platform has come as a result of this interim solution that we've built, and that is where we are going to make data available to customers on request on a monthly basis through this platform. So all tools that we are intending to implement for the wheeling solution will be either updated or available in the next 6 to 8 months. From a wheeling services perspective, the only product that we still have to roll out officially to the general public is portfolio wheeling. And the wheeling office is now being capacitated to be able to handle all of the queries that we're getting and all of the requests that we are getting. From a contracts perspective, all our contracts, with the exception of the additions we need to add for portfolio wheeling, has been updated and approved. So portfolio wheeling is our last contract that we need to, or pro forma that we need to standardize and update. Tariffs. All our tariffs have been approved. There is 1 or 2 additional charges for virtual wheeling, portfolio wheeling, that we will be taking through NERSA for approval as part of the standard charges environment, right? Then from a training perspective, we rolled out training to our customer execs. I do monthly training sessions on request in each province, where we take them through contracting from the stage of the actual project being initiated right through to conclusion of a wheeling contract. And we have initiated a marketing campaign, which you will start seeing over the next 2-3 months through various media entities, a business-to-business kind of focus on, and for wheeling, and that is our comms drive. This is what we've rolled out in the interim from a comms perspective. We have a page specifically for wheeling, and where you can see the detail around virtual wheeling. Traditional wheeling page is there as it was before. However, we are updating that, making it more user-friendly. And then portfolio wheeling page is in development. That, in a nutshell, is what Eskom has been doing in relation to wheeling. And the floor, I'm going to give it back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Aisha. That was an excellent presentation. I can confirm that the core faculty that is developing templates for the Munichs is in the background amending some documents, taking some of the stuff that you presented. So it's really amazing. I think that's the importance of cross-pollination. Of course, I'm sure there's lots of questions, colleagues. I've got just 2 to get the questions going. The first, let me put it like this. One of the objectives of this training, of course, is to unlock wheeling across South Africa. And there are some challenges within our municipalities. Firstly, a warm body challenge, which is the number of staff, municipalities and capacity. And secondly, there is a billing issue. But from what I see in your presentation is that Eskom has, started with wheeling, and they've got interim measures where, for example, around skills and warm bodies, you've forged ahead, even though you haven't fully occupied your organogram for that particular function. And secondly, from a billing perspective, you also started off manually, and now you're moving towards automation. Am I getting that correctly from your presentation, Aisha?
100% correctly. I mean, the number of contracts that existed for wheeling prior to us now onboarding a lot more products and services was limited to 20 or less, right? That did not necessitate the requirement for permanent staff. But over the last couple of months, we have seen a rapid rise in the request for wheeling contracts. But we've also realized under the energy trading space that we would need to facilitate, and manage this environment a lot more, effectively, to be able to, report and forecast and look at the impact, etc., across the board, and not just look at it as a once-off type of contract and then leave it to stand on its own. So that's why Eskom has the new wheeling office, but you will see it's not thousands of staff or hundreds of staff. It's a handful of staff that will be managing these contracts.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Aisha. I think in a nutshell, what you're saying is that, you know, we can start, all of us can start where we are and then build towards our ideal offices. We've got another question on the chat. How is the energy data forecast submitted by the generator used by NECOM, and what are the consequences if the actual generator feed-in differs from the energy data forecast submitted? I hope you got that, Aisha.
Yeah, so the initial forecast is submitted on a forecasting template, right? Which we are now automating. There will be a platform on the wheeling platform. You will submit it via that. NECOM also requires that forecast to be updated twice a year. Right, so the initial request we had was just from generators or 2 generators to supply us with a forecast. Now it's for both loads and generators to supply us with forecast, and a 3-year forecast at that. There is already penalties in existence for not meeting your generating, how do you call it, volumes that you forecasted and the variance thereof. NECOM has submitted a request for variances in offtake as well, based on, you know, what you're forecasting. The idea for that is to get a better view of the energy balancing, to balance the network, the energy and the network a bit better than what we did before. I think because distribution is now also playing in the energy trading space, there's a lot more focus on, you know, we're not only reliant on NTCSA now, it is distribution also is creating that expertise with their own environment. And the more information we have, the better it is from our side to be able to do balancing and everything else.
Excellent. Manfred, if you're satisfied, I see a thumbs up. I hope it came up. Any other questions, colleagues? We've got NECOM on the line. So from the presentation, it seems they've got the blueprint. Surely, we should have some questions.
Chair, through you, I just want to make one comment. It starts with one person in your environment understanding the end-to-end of the entire product or service that you want to offer. And that is that's where it starts. And you need that person to be, engaging at all levels, at, prepping the environment to actually roll out wheeling. So you start with one knowledge, so you build your knowledge base up from one to many.
Excellent. We need, in each municipality, we need a wheeling champion.
Yeah.
That is what you mean. Excellent. Agreed. Colleagues, we don't have Aisha for too long. If I were you, I would ask the questions now, or else I'll use the opportunity to ask my questions while we wait. So Aisha, do you foresee a scenario where there's a municipal connected generator with an NECOM off-taker? And how would you deal with that? You see a scenario like that?
I see that in future. I don't foresee it in the short-term future, Chair. We have responded on that, on the NERSA framework to say that's still something we have not prepped for from an NECOM perspective. So I think our focus is to look at NECOM to NECOM at the moment, and NECOM, the virtual wheeling one, NECOM to Munich end users, etc. Obviously not looking at, impacting any of the municipal spaces. But I think in future we are looking 2 to 3 years from now at that. The actual thinking around that and implementation around that is conceptually there, but we haven't given it any, I think, any real thought, other than let's just get these products going, get our systems going, and then we can look at expansion.
Excellent, excellent. I think what we're getting from your presentation, Aisha, is that actually, to implement these products, we don't have to be perfect in our first iteration, but we know where we want to go, and then let's start off slowly but surely.
100%.
Excellent. Any questions, colleagues, or is it because we've got a technical course on a Friday afternoon? Any of my co-pilots who have some questions? Nick, Megan, Shirley, Josh, any questions for Eskom?
No questions. I just thought it was excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of work, a lot of years went into this, and hopefully the municipalities can learn from what Eskom has done. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to endorse that as well, Sinawa. I thought it was really comprehensive, and even as you were speaking, Aisha, we noted a couple of things we need to bring into the municipal sort of policy template. So really, really useful, and thanks very much for being that champion on that side.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you for your time. We appreciate these inputs, and like you've heard from the team, all of these inputs are now assisting us to better prepare municipalities also to create winning environments for wheeling. So thank you so much. So I'm going to segue a bit, move away a bit from that presentation. This slot is currently for a Q&A, but I see the colleagues don't want to ask too many questions, but I'll include lots of questions for Monday's quiz, where we can engage further on tariffs. But I do hope that some of your concerns are sorted around tariffs, around revenue, around cost of supply studies. If not, colleagues, please use the chat. Use the chat at all times to list your concerns. And then the team will answer that. But what I want to do now, you remember in the morning when we worked on that quiz, one of the things we noticed was that as a team, we are still quite uncertain around the wheeling policy itself. And then I want to use this time a bit for Josh to just come back, talk about the wheeling policy and talk about some of the changes that we had promised on day one. And of course, hopefully after these few minutes, we can better, I guess, understand and be comfortable with developing a wheeling policy for ourselves. We saw in Aisha's presentation, Eskom also has one. So let's make sure that we also have the same starting point. Josh, are you around? Or is it Josh or is it Megan who was going to come in now?
Hi, sorry.
So now it was Josh. Yeah. Sorry. There you go, Josh.
I just tried to unmute myself and I hit leave. So now I guess I'm going to leave my camera off with our recent happenings, but you are moving particularly well, so I want to try. No, anyway, let me not do the camera, but let me share the thanks now, the template wheeling policy. So it's this online Google Doc that everyone has access to. We can share the link again once I'm done. This will just be 5 minutes to talk you through some of the updates. So yeah, on Wednesday, it was useful to see the Overstrand municipality updates, and also just in discussion, it emerged that some changes would be useful. So like we said, the intention of this document is for it to be your document to customize, and we really want each municipality to leave this training with a fully customized wheeling policy draft, obviously, that you can take forward in your municipal processes. So there were these key decisions to be made. In going through the decisions, it became clear that the surplus generation question was that we should all agree that we should start with no surplus generation. So what I've done is I removed the option where one compensates for surplus generation, because I don't think, as far as we're aware, no one would want to do that from the start. So that was the one that I've removed, and then the other big change that we did was we moved all of these requirements into the annex. And the thinking was that when we want to update the policy as things go, or you want to update your requirements, then you don't need to go through a full municipal policy council approval update process. You can just update the appendix as things emerge and develop. So let me scroll down to that section. For those who weren't on the call on Wednesday, this might be new, but yeah, it's a simple high-level policy. So the way to think about it is that the body of the policy document is now just background information on how wheeling works without providing any detailed requirements. So this section 5 in the body of the document previously stipulated what's allowed, who's allowed to wheel, but now we've kept this more generic and moved those sections into the appendix. So you'll see here's the annexure with the wheeling requirements, and here's the different green and blue decisions that you can make, green being the recommended approach and blue being the more advanced approach. So it's the requirements are listed here in the annexure, and then we've added an application form where customers can apply to wheel. So this is the second annexure of the policy document. So here the customers can provide the off-taker can provide their earth number and GPS coordinates and meter number, electricity account number, the notified maximum demand, because this is a key part of the decision, and the generator stipulates where they connected on ESCOM or municipal, and the generator details and the generator meter number. Of course, you're welcome and encouraged to take this further and customize this as per your municipal process. One thing we wanted to point out that we think is really important, and this is in the body of the document, is to stipulate very clearly what the application process is. So there's a lot of yellow text here saying where the customers must submit it, within how many days you'll respond, and then to provide information to the customers what the approval process looks like. So I don't think it's expected for this to happen quickly. Wheeling will take time, but I think what's important is to provide transparency on the process to your customers. So this is all yellow because we encourage everyone to spend time here. Here we've said the sort of suggested text is that you submit a written application, the relevant municipal official will initiate the process and complete the necessary checks, whether the generator connection approval, off-taker criteria is met, whether the appropriate metering infrastructure is in place, and then depending on the wheeling scenario, agreements will need to be put in place. Aisha suggested that agreements should be time-bound. So this green text here is to encourage people to, I think, as I understood, that it was a 3-year wheeling agreement as per ESCOM's approach. So maybe you want to, unless I misunderstood that, Aisha, but maybe you want to stipulate here that agreements may be time-bound. And then in terms of the operation and billing, once the wheeling application is approved, the relevant changes will moved on the billing system. And then we've added this: wheeling customers will need to provide regular and ongoing wheeled energy forecasts. This is a new sort of requirement imposed by ESCOM, but we think it's useful. So maybe you want to add more detail on the types of energy forecast that you might require. Again, this is in the body of the document, so we don't want to provide too much detail here that might change. The suggestion is if you want to add a very specific detail on wheeled energy forecast, then you can add it as a separate point on the wheeling requirements section in the annex. Yeah, so those are the changes we've made from Wednesday's discussion. If anyone has any other suggestions, then yeah, let us know, and hopefully people have access to the Google Doc.
Excellent, Josh. Excellent for that quick turnaround and assisting us with those amendments. I see we've got a question from Wendy. Over to you, Wendy.
Thank you very much. Josh, just a question. On the document that we were working on Wednesday, we were saying there that we should not be allowing for excess energy onto the network. But when you read the SALGA document, the SALGA document is actually encouraging that we do make provision for purchasing of excess energy. So there's a little bit of a contradiction now between the two documents. I haven't finished going through the one from COCTA, but if you give me a second, I'll actually just tell you exactly where it was. Because you know, what you guys are saying, it's one thing, and then what Salga is saying is another thing. So for me, it's a little bit confusing. Do we allow it or don't we allow it? I think it would be a better thing if we allowed, because obviously we're purchasing at a lower cost, and then obviously selling it at a higher rate, which means our profit margin will actually be up a bit versus having bad Eskom debts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have a look and I'll just post it on the chat exactly what section that was on. If we could just get some better understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, that's really helpful. So I agree with you that we want to. Sinao, do you mind if I respond? It's fine. Okay. I agree with you that in an ideal world, we'd take the excess energy and compensate the customer at a price below what we would have paid Eskom. It makes sense. The only problem is that we're discussing is that because this energy is coming from typically a pure generator, like a large generator we're wheeling, they don't have much consumption. So when they buy electricity from the municipality, then they owe you money, obviously. And then now if they feed excess into the grid, then you can provide them a credit that credits against their existing consumption. That's sort of the way net billing works with embedded generation customers. You give them a credit. And the benefit of giving a credit is that you don't have to pay the customer cash. You don't have to take their bank details and pay them. Because when you do pay them, then that triggers the MFMA for competitive procurement processes. So for when a customer has their own rooftop solar and they're buying electricity from you and you're feeding electricity into the grid, then that's fine. You can give them a credit because they've got a big bill against which you can credit. Now with wheeling, it's a little bit different because this is typically going to just be a large generator that doesn't have a big bill for you to credit against. So if you wanted to take that excess energy from them, then and pay them for it, then you'd need to trigger an MFMA procurement process. So what the suggestion sort of is evolving towards is that you say to them, they are free to excess and push surplus into the municipal grid. It's just we can't compensate them for it. So we can take it for free, but we can't pay them for it. I think that's how I'm seeing it. So I don't know if the SALGA document, I think the SALGA, we're all trying to work on this together and figure it out as we go. The SALGA document probably says that, I don't know I'm not sure if it's the SALGA status of wheeling report that you're speaking about or which SALGA document. Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Page 8. Which document is it?
It's the one that they shared with us. I'll tell you now because I actually have it open here. It's the SALGA status of wheeling.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Page 8, third paragraph.
Do you want to just read that to us?
Sure, give me a second. I just want to enlarge it just a tad. Half-hourly billing means generation and
Yes.
compensation conciliation is done each half hourly. So much energy generated, so any energy generated that is not consumed on behalf of the off-taker within half hour becomes surplus energy fed into the grid. Half-hourly billing increases the risk of excess energy generation. For example, if the off-taker is load-shedded or shortfall of generation, for example, if the generator is curtailed because the short billing period, excess energy is more likely for every half-hour billing, meaning it is much more important to
Okay,
to
I got you.
accompany
No, Wendy,
the
that's fine.
mechanism.
I'm with you. I can say it in simple terms, what I'm hearing you say. So when there's shorter billing period, like when you do half hourly, I don't know if you're following, then there's much bigger chance of having excess energy because you need to match every half an hour. So that's Cape Town's approach. So maybe I think they're presenting next week, Snow. Is that right? Courtney will be, there was.
Yeah,
Okay.
on Friday next week.
Okay, great. So then they're doing the half hourly approach. I don't know if Aisha or Shirley is able to comment on whether Eskom compensates for excess energy that's not consumed.
No, Eskom doesn't. Eskom doesn't unless you've got for example, I know they've got the standard offer program, which
Yes.
is like the feed-in tariff, but
Kind of something different.
Yeah, it's kind of different. So you 100% correct. To compensate for excess involves procurement. So it's let's say it's a function of wheeling, a potential function of wheeling or outcome of wheeling that you might have excess, but you can't deal with it as part of wheeling. It needs to be dealt with as procurement. So Eskom caps it to consumption. Yeah, and you're 100% correct, Josh. As you go to more to hourly billing, that becomes more and more of an issue. When you do monthly summed up, it's less because you can get overs and unders in time of use periods. So yeah, Eskom does cap it to consumption, and if there is excess, it has to be dealt with through a procurement or be allocated to somebody else. Thanks.
Excellent. Bernard, I see you want to come in.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. It's likely to be so firstly, I think there's space in calling for the MFMA to, I don't know if the right word is to be adjusted, that like obviously if a municipality can buy power at a cheaper rate, that should be a good thing, right? But that's a long, complicated thing, and we don't know if that's ever going to happen. So we have to work within the constraints that we've got. At the moment, the constraint is it is incredibly hard to buy energy without going through a long and complicated procurement process, and compensating for excess energy beyond the netting of a bill would be procurement. And that's the same issue that like the city of Cape Town ran into in their SSCG program, where at the moment you can get energy consumed, but like other people are struggling to get that right. So I agree that's an issue and something that needs to be solved. But in terms of prepping for it in your framework, maybe there's space for saying it is something that we plan to look at in the future, but in the current situation, it's just not possible to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Bernard, Josh, and Shirley for that clarification. Wendy, are you comfortable a bit now? I see your hand up. Any more questions, colleagues? Any more questions? Now what I think I'm gonna do, I'm gonna paste a Google link there, an anonymous Google link where colleagues can write their questions, because I'm more certain that we have questions, but I will anonymize it so I can get the question. I think this is the perfect time to segue into move towards lunch. But before we do that, we've got, let me share quickly. Let me tell you what our plans are for the afternoon. So our plans for the afternoon, just like the first day, we've got a working session, a workshop. So that will be from 2 to 4. So remember, if you want that certificate and those extra credits, please participate. So the working session really will be led by my colleagues, and then we'll get into a bit of examples on some of the concepts that we discussed earlier, some practical examples, and then we'll introduce a tool which has revenue impact assessment and billing recon functionality. But just for today, we'll look at the revenue impact on that tool. So that means, of course, everyone should be in a position to play around with this tool. So I'm just going to confirm with Josh or Nick, what kind of preparations should our colleagues do before the afternoon session in terms of, do they need a laptop with Excel? What do they need? Or Nick?
Yes, thank you, Thank you, Sinawa. Yes, so this afternoon, if you have a laptop with you, or if you are watching this, I assume you would, that has Excel on it, it would be beneficial because then you can follow along. I will be demonstrating how it works. So if you don't have Excel working on your computer at the moment, it's not the end of the world. I sent out the Excel document to a whole bunch of people this morning, but I've also uploaded it on the Google Drive, and we'll post the link to it after we conclude for lunch. But for those of you that are not able to open the Google Drive links, I did email it this morning. So when we start this afternoon at 2, it would be best to have that open and up and running, so that you can follow along and get used to using the tool yourself.
Thank you, Nick. That promises to be an interesting session. Yeah, I'll just ask also my core colleagues if there's anything else they'd like to touch on before we go for lunch. Is there anything else on your side, team? Going once, going twice. Anything from the side of our colleagues in the meeting? Any last question? Going once, going twice, gone. Thank you so much, team. I think we can move towards lunch now. Let's meet again at 2 p.m. Same time, same place. See you then. Cheers. Enjoy.